Reptichip sets the standard for reptile substrates. Made from the highest quality coconut available anywhere in the world, Reptichip allows enthusiasts and keepers to provide their reptiles with the necessary humidity and thermoregulation required for your animals to thrive. You can support the podcast by heading to reptichip.com/snakeboy or visit the link in the description below. This episode is brought to you in part by Exoterra. If you're as passionate about reptiles and amphibians as I am, you know that quality matters. I use Exoterra products on all my reptile and amphibian enclosures, which is why I'm excited to be partnering with them. From naturalistic decor to innovative lighting and enclosures of all sizes, Exoterra has everything you need for your cold-blooded companions. Exoterra, make your reptiles feel at home. This episode is brought to you in part by Unlimited Exotic Pets. Every day is Veranda Day for Nick Lillis, and it shows. At Unlimited Exotic Pets, Nick produces high-quality monitor lizards with a deep commitment to ethical care practices and top-tier nutrition. These aren't just pets. They're responsibly bred, ethically raised animals. Whether you're looking for a new companion, starting a breeding project, or anything in between, Nick has you covered. Unlimited Exotic Pets, keeping and breeding quality without limitations. Love reptiles? Don't miss this. If you're passionate about reptiles, amphibians, and everything cold-blooded, Reptiles magazine is a must-have. Each issue is packed with expert care tips, stunning photography, and the latest news in the reptile world. Whether you're a seasoned herpetologist or just starting your reptile journey, this magazine has something for you. Subscribe today and stay informed on the best ways to care for your scaly friends. For only $14.99 a year, you can step outside your algorithm and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally see or learn about. My family reads Reptiles magazine, and you should too. Visit subscribe.reptilesmagazine.com to get started. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. All right, well, welcome to episode 91 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to Chris Applin of Rare Reptiles. And yeah, man, so we were talking, just before we started recording. So you've been in Indonesia for the last 18 months. And that's right. Yeah. I kind of want to hear, what led up to you going to Indonesia and I mean, your obsession. What's your background? I kind of want to, because I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. Yeah. But you're so focused on the animals, that I can gain an immense amount of knowledge. Anybody can from listening to your podcast and everything. But yeah, I really want to hear sort of your story and what brought you to this point to being in Indonesia for 18 months.
Yeah, it's quite a long story, that one. If you go back, I won't go into the same as everyone else, dinosaurs, and then just having a fascination. But what the pivotal point was a next door neighbor got a corn snake. Back then I thought in the UK, they just weren't kept, reptiles just weren't kept. It wasn't a common pet. And everyone used to sort of tell you, oh, you need a license to keep reptiles, which is half true if they're venomous or dangerous. A license got bought in about 1975, but the general public sort of thought that went through to all reptiles. So I never thought you could actually keep reptiles as pets. But going on from that, my next door neighbor obviously ended up with a corn snake, and he invited me around to his house. And then he put this corn snake in my hands, and then that was it. It was just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And then all I wanted to do then was obviously get my own one and learn all about them. I was really, really lucky. I had a really supportive mum. She was like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. She was like, she is an animal person anyway. not with snakes, more with dogs and stuff like that. But she was like, yeah, you can absolutely get one. One caveat is we're going to go to the pet shop now and buy you a book on reptiles, a book on corn snakes. You've got to read that book cover to cover, and I'm going to test you on it before we go and buy one, which was like a really cool thing, and it sort of instilled a lot of what I enjoy with the reptiles is learning a lot about them before you actually go and purchase them. So I've become a sort of a book addict as well as a reptile addict. But yeah, so obviously I read that book, paid back to front, cover to cover, and obviously ended up with my first corn snake. So that was 1998. So pretty going back a fair way then. So that just sort of meandered on for a couple of years while I was still young. Really enjoyed keeping that. And then the town I grew up in, just sort of by coincidence, was one of the best reptile shops in the UK. Was actually in my town. It's only a small town. Nobody would really know it if I told you where it was. But they were some of the first people that had like the first Brettles pythons. A lot of that bloodline is now ended up in the US. So they actually sold the first Bredel pythons to Paul Harris, and then you've got a line of Bredel pythons in the States now that descends from that line. So they had loads of really cool, interesting stuff, and obviously I was going in there every week to buy my pinkies or small mice for my corn snake. And then obviously that opens up when you go into a reptile shop, all these other opportunities and avenues of lizards and frogs and stuff. So that's when the addiction really started. Started off with a corn snake. And I think after that, my first lizard was either a tokay gecko, which was a bad choice. If you know about tokay geckos, they're pretty mad. Or it was a leopard gecko. I can't remember now which way round it was. But that started the sort of lizard addiction.
Now,
anyways,
I've been seeing more and more tokay geckos that are like handleable and tame. I have a Patreon that has one that they handle and play with, and I've seen I shouldn't say play with, but they handle them. Yeah. And I've seen it on Instagram too, where people are just like picking up their tokays, and I'm like,
madness.
What happened?
Yeah, I think just people are captive breeding them now. They were just such a sort of a wild caught lizard. They're always wild caught and so cheap. But they got added to CITES now, so they're CITES 2, I believe. So it's a lot harder to get them. Obviously, they need to be captive bred. So yeah, I think a lot more people are breeding them and probably getting them from small and raising them up. But I don't know, they're just one of them lizards that are outwardly very defensive, very vocal.
Yeah. So you said, you got your first snake in your book, and you got into all that in what you said that was 1998. And how old were you at the time?
8 years old.
Okay. All right. So we're the same age then. I was born in 90 as well.
Oh yeah.
Except my parents, unfortunately, did not let me have any snakes.
Yeah, it goes one or two ways. It's either a no-go, I think, or you get lucky and strike out, and they're sort of into animals, maybe not reptiles, but they're into animals, so you can sort of swerve your way in a little bit.
Yeah. So what happened? So you got either it was either a tokay or a leopard gecko, and then what happened? Yeah, so there? Sorry to derail you.
No. Like I said, it's quite a long story. So obviously I was going in there into this reptile shop more and more. And I probably around the age of 12, because I was in there so much, they actually offered me a Saturday job, no pay or anything, just like it was basically live food at that point, crickets and locusts. So I was ecstatic. I thought all my Christmases had come at once to work this Saturday, and I ended up working Saturday and Sunday. I did that for until I was about 17, and obviously learned the trade. You learn the retail side of stuff. As well as that, and then an opportunity came up to buy my own reptile shop. So I managed to lend some money off my grandparents, sort of like a business loan. And they did that. It wasn't too much money, with obviously the promise of paying that back.
How old were you when you
17
bought your own?
At that point?
You were 17.
Yeah.
And you got your own reptile shop.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's just unbelievable. But like I said, I've been working, I managed to explain to them. I knew in every question you could ask me, a bit like going back to that book, every question about running a reptile shop, I knew, because I basically was on my own on a Saturday and Sunday, during my early teens, doing the cashing up. And then all the reptile stuff, and then having people come in with problems and stuff. And it was only a small one in like a garden centre. And then again, I was very lucky. My mum actually helped me at that point, because I think I was still at school or trying to do. We have like A levels over here, a bit before university, which I wasn't interested in at all. All I wanted to do was run a reptile shop, obviously. But mum was like, "Oh no, you need to graduate and go to university and do something proper, and I'll help you with this reptile shop," which didn't work, because I was like, I just want to be, at the shop. I want to be in there. So I dropped out halfway through, my higher education sort of thing. So then I had that shop running until about 2014. I would have been 24. Unfortunately, me not having the business acumen, I went from a very successful small shop, thought I was the bee's knees, thought I needed to expand and grow way before we did. So I ended up buying a massive unit. I can't remember how big it was now, maybe 3,000 square foot. It was an old, I don't know, you have like a 7-Eleven you would probably have in the States, that sort of size shop. Which again, I thought was absolutely amazing, but didn't really realize all the overheads that come with the bigger shop. So I've kitted it out. Look, it was amazing. I had a really good showroom, all like plastic Bavaria in there, every sort of animal you can imagine. But unfortunately, that was sort of the dawn of the internet age, where everyone started buying stuff online. And what used to happen is they used to come in, get all my information off me, I'd go and show them our setups, and then they would just get their phone and go, well, I can get this bulb, UV tube, vivarium, whatever it is, for half price online. Literally the prices that I was paying trade price for, they were able to get online at that point. So that put a quick kibosh on that. And unfortunately, the wholesalers that were supplying us were also supplying these online reptile shops that didn't have any overheads, and were doing very small margins. So yeah, that sort of ended that. And I thought that was the dream over then, Adam. I thought that was me, my reptile. I'd done well. I'd always kept sort of few things at home, but I was pretty annoyed at that point. So we shut the shop down. And what that led to, I took some time out to go traveling to Australia, which I'd always wanted to do, and obviously didn't have the time to do in the shop. So I went herping in Australia for 3 months. Which was amazing, absolutely fantastic. And then come back and I was like, right, now I need to get a real job, something that actually pays money and something that's, not going to be affected by anything else. So I retrained right at the bottom as an apprentice electrician, and then did that for 10 years, which was great, absolutely amazing money. I was able to keep my collection throughout all of this. So at that point, it was a lot of carpet pythons during the early stages, and then coming to the latter stages, was the tree monitors.
What kind of carpet pythons did you keep?
Oh, all sorts. McCarthy, all of the morphs, which were great until we started breeding all these jags and stuff, and they come out all wonky. And I was like, I've invested a lot of money, and that was pretty soul destroying to have these. You stack a caramel, zebra, jag on top of each other, albino, het albino, and they come out, which they look amazing, but they're all got all these problems. I was like, this really isn't for me at that point. So that led more to going through the monitors. I'd kept the monitors all through it, but there wasn't the market to keep it going really in the UK with the monitors. People liked them, but the carpet thing was like a parallel sort to the Royal Python. I didn't really get into the Royal craze. I was always doing sort of the more obscure stuff, but the carpet python sort of fit that model, but also had the morphs as well, which made them quite marketable. But like I said, that wasn't for me. So yeah, retrained as electrician, and then during I can't remember, I got rid of the carpet pythons, and then got really heavy into the tree monitors again, which, going back again, when I had my shop, I was one of the first people to breed the green tree monitors in the UK. Had some really good success with them. Stupidly did that, made quite a bit of money, and that's what ended up me investing into the carpet pythons, which took me away from probably what I should have just stuck with the whole time. If you know what I mean, I really, really enjoyed keeping the monitors and the tree monitors especially. But
what really draws you to them? What do you like? What does it for you?
I mean, all monitors are just like I don't want to say like a step above because it sounds a bit elitist, but they're intelligent compared to, I'm going to sound bad now, compared to like when you keep a lot of pythons and stuff. They're intelligent in their own way. They're not that they're not intelligent. That's bad to say.
What are you saying about my snakes, Chris?
Yeah, I'll get cancelled now. I love pythons. I love snakes. Don't worry. There's just a bit more of a feedback with an intelligent lizard that you don't really get with some of the pythons. Pythons are amazing and they got unique behaviors and that, but monitors are active in the day, so there's always something going on in there. The tree monitors especially come in such a wide variety of colors and just beautiful. And like I said, they're out all the time. You can get them very handleable. I don't. They just do it for me. Even the smaller monitors, you keep the Yaki monitors and stuff like that. There's just something a little bit more going on than what you get with a lot of other reptiles.
So how long did it take you to get zeroed in specifically on tree monitors? Would you say that they are your primary passion, that they are the thing that you are drawn the most to now?
Yeah. Now it's a bit different. I mean, we'll get to that, the Indonesian stuff, because I work with so many different species now. Like I said, I had that good bit of success with those Prasinus early on. And then I ended up getting some Rysingri, which is the yellow tree monitor, a bit later. And I had a lot of success, sort of, if that makes sense. So I had a lot of breedings, a lot of eggs, but the eggs weren't good. So it took me a good couple of years to actually dial in and work what was going on. But they're not like as amazing as they are. They're very bird-like in their nesting habitats. If you haven't got the nesting set up properly, you can get every other bit of their husbandry correct, and you can fail right at the last minute by just having a female that will scatter eggs. So yeah, so that took a bit of working out, but once you get them dialed in, they're fairly easy to get going. I had a good amount of success with those yellows, and then I had some black tree monitors as well that didn't give me as many issues. I think I'd learned a lot from the yellow tree monitors, and then obviously dialed that in with the black trees as well.
Okay. All right. So you were kind of getting out of carpet pythons, getting into monitors, and this is all while you're going into the trade of becoming an electrician.
Yeah. So I've already. The weird thing about having a shop or having a big collection when you make it a job is you sort of get burnt out quite quickly with it. So one of the most enjoyable collections I had was quite a small collection, probably the smallest collection I had with those yellow tree monitors, some black tree monitors, and a few dwarf monitors. And I was doing my electrician stuff, and it was a joy to come into the reptile room and just do that as a as a proper hobby again. I'd sort of lost and got very defeated with the shop, and then the shop not working out. It sort of burns you out a lot, and it was so refreshing to be an electrician, not have to do it as a job, and then come back and do that collection and really get into it and really enjoy it. It wasn't work. It was, I look forward to finishing work and going in there. I'd go in there in the morning before I started work, and then, all weekend, I'd be in there, much to the dismay of the ex-missus who wanted to go shopping or to the mall or something. But I was like, I need to do this. I need to clean this out. So that buzz that we all have, or hopefully we all have, sort of rejuvenated quite a lot back into me.
Nice. And so where did you go from there? When are you did you just totally leave how did you end up in Indonesia? I mean, how do you go from being an electrician to being in Indonesia? Because I have a trade. I have a blue collar job, and boy, I'd like to steer away from that and get into something more animal focused.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a chain of lucky events, really. So I was when I get into something, I really, really get into it. And with the reptiles, I've always been into it. But like I said before, that trip to Australia started another addiction, which was herping for reptiles. So since 2015, I'd gone herping to Australia or Indonesia every single year. And my job,
wow.
as you know, having a blue collar job, they're usually quite well paid. I wouldn't have been able to do that in the shop. So it gave me this other sort of avenue to now, right, I work really hard as an electrician, but now I've got quite a bit of money. I can now, spend 2-3 weeks out of my annual leave to go herping and looking for this stuff. So basically, I'd started going to look for tree monitors in the wild, which not a lot of people had done at that point. Someone that had done it was a guy called Peter Falsham, who owns is a partner in the reptile farm I'm at now. So he'd seen that I'd been going over to Patanta, and he was like, well, as you're going over there so much and going to these tree monitors, why don't you swing in to the farm and just see what they're doing there? They're struggling a little bit with some of the tree monitors and the monitor stuff. You seem to know what's going on. All my life I've been pretty quiet and shut my mouth, and I think I threw out there, I don't suppose they need someone a bit more permanent. He sort of jumped at it. He's yeah, go speak to Bungie there, who's the the owner. I'm sure I'll do it. And I sort of didn't really think much of it. I was like, yeah, I'm sure that's never going to happen. I'm sure I'm going to go out there and give him a few tips. I doubt he wants some guy from the UK actually coming over there. And when I got to the farm, it was a lot different to what I'd heard stories of, or you hear bad stories about stuff, but the farm's got like a 5-bed villa with a swimming pool outside, and then every monitor species you can think of. And it sort of clicked when I was there. I was like, no, I could probably actually move over here and make a good life of it. So me and the owner, Bungie, started speaking, and he was well up for bringing me over. And then within 6 months, I had a visa and I was over here. But I'm telling you, it's not like it's not to be taken lightly. I think I just didn't think about it. I was like, this is a dream opportunity that's never, ever going to come up. I'm not married. I haven't got any kids. I haven't got a mortgage on the house or anything. I can literally up and go. And this is probably the last chance in my lifetime that I've got to do that. So it's just a mix of being very lucky, being in the right place at the right time, and then being brave / stupid, I don't know what it is, just to say, yeah, I'm just going to do it. Leave a high paying salary to come over here and do what you love. But I knew it would be the last chance I'd have. Otherwise, I'd just be working that electrician job, for the rest of my life. As you see people on site or in these jobs, and they're still in their 60s doing that trade just because it pays so well. This is, a real passion.
Yeah, and they're usually such happy guys too, right?
Oh yeah. I want to tell you what a good choice you've made early on, and how they don't regret anything at all.
Yeah, just happy guys, just working their their life away.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so well, as it's just so well paid. It's hard to leave that, but yeah, it was just a mix of everything for once falling in the right place. Just
dude, that's incredible. And what a I mean it. And yeah, like if I was your friend back then, I'd probably be like, dude, you're insane. Like that's so crazy to but at the same time it'd be like, what an opportunity. Like you kind of have to do this. And so what did you identify that they were not optimized? Like how did you help them optimize, and how did you identify husbandry issues and help dial it in?
The biggest one, straight away, they had eggs in the incubator, but they had like an incubator, a bit like an old school. It's like a big incubator, but the way they were incubating the eggs was quite old school. They had heat cable in a load of water, like a big, gallons and gallons of water. But then they were actually putting the eggs into incubation media as well. And what was happening, the water was evaporating in the incubator, condensating on the roof and just dripping all over these boxes. So it was just way too humid. When you're, incubating, especially monitor eggs, they're very sensitive. You don't need the incubator to be humid. You need your box to be humid, and that's the bit you want to control. Where they were doing everything humid, and I was lifting up tree monitor clutches, and there was just like rotten eggs in there. I was like, these have got no chance. They've got air holes in it, but even outside of the the medium, it's just completely saturated. So that was one of the first things. They were keeping a lot of the monitors in together, which can work. But it's a lot more easy to manage. I say easy to manage. It's harder to manage. It's a lot more successful if you take the male out of the female's enclosure, feed her up a lot, and then reintroduce. but they were just keeping stuff together. So they were having a bit of success, but not optimizing with the amount of animals they had. And then the cages were pretty barren compared to what I've got them now. So they had a few branches in there, but especially tree monitors, they're pretty stressy animals, and they're very active. So they need a lot of cover in there, a lot of live planting outdoors, and just loads of branches. So fairly simple stuff, but just stuff that they either hadn't thought of, or just I don't know, really, just hadn't thought of it, I guess.
So they were successfully breeding. They were getting eggs, but then it sounds like they were kind of. I mean, what would you say, like a percentage? Like how many eggs were they losing because of the poor incubation?
Oh, loads. Yeah. Whole clutches of crocodile monitor. There was crocodile monitor eggs in when I got there, and they were just ruined. And yeah, fair few tree monitor eggs in there as well. Just it was sort of heartbreaking to see, but easy to solve. Which was a good thing for me, really. So as soon as I got there, I got all that water out. I put a fan in the. They didn't have a fan in the incubator, so I put a fan to circulate the air in there. And the first few clutches I got were successful.
Are you doing like electrical work on the farm to, like, since you have that trade skill, are you updating things and like making things better from that perspective as well?
Well, the electric side of things.
Yeah.
No. Funnily enough, I went round and I was still in electrician mode. I was like, have you not had any electrical fires here? Because Indonesia, if you ever go there, if you see videos of it, it's so mad. I don't know how it works. I had a good argument with the guys there. They put some new wiring in that I'd asked for, and I thought I'll just leave them to it. And then they got the live and the neutral completely the wrong way, but they were trying to convince me otherwise. As a fully qualified trained electrician, I was like, guys, no, you're just wrong. And then 2 weeks later, the actual the incoming meters tail actually caught on fire, and so we did actually have electrical fire, which obviously I jinxed completely. And no fire extinguishers. So I was like, whoa, we need fire extinguishers. They were all running around. They were trying to get water. I was like, you can't put water on electrical fire. So I think someone went and got, the fire extinguishers that come with your car, which are safe for like electrical fires. And we managed to put it out. I was like, right, there's some serious stuff. Apart from the reptiles, we need to get some safety standards in place. We need fire extinguishers everywhere. And these electrics need checking. But it's so bad, I don't want to put myself to it, because if something happens, they'll blame the white man that come over and did it. So you best just leaving them to it. I mean, I check over a few things if it's like a new circuit, and I've taught them a few things, but hands-on, I don't want to get the blame for it, basically.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, why take on that liability?
Yeah, but it's mad that there's no earthing over here. So it's super dangerous. You got to be careful. You really have to be careful. Just in living in Indonesia, it's one of the hazards. If you see a wire and you think, oh, there's no way that would be live, I'm sure it would be live over here.
You should see my neighbor's yard. He's got just Romex like buried all over his yard, going up like stapled onto 4x4 posts.
Yeah,
it's like Indonesia in his yard, I'm sure.
Yeah. They think some of the stuff they do, they like cut plastic bottles in half and put them over just like a light fitting for waterproofing, stuff like that. It's just you just never get away with it in any other country, I think. But Indonesia, if it works, the problem is if it works here, it's very hard to convince them that it's not safe or not dangerous. They have a lot more common sense than say we do in the UK, where everything has to, you have to do everything to make sure people don't die, because people do stupid stuff. Here, if it happens, they're like, oh, well, he shouldn't have been touching it then. What an idiot for going and touching it.
So when you made the decision, the choice to move over there to Indonesia, what happened to your collection? And kind of did you sell everything off and then just move over, or did you take some of the animals with you?
No, literally just given away the last of my collection, basically, because I didn't know it was going to work out, and because that collection was so important to me. I sort of made a promise to myself that I'd keep on to it for a year, just in case I come over here and it wasn't what I thought, and it was a lot harder, or I missed home or whatever. I was like, I'm not going to lose that collection I'd built up. There was some like tree monitors that I'd bred. So they were F3 yellow tree monitors that I'd raised up, and they were actually breeding at that point. So I'd gone a long way with that collection. It wasn't like a fresh collection. It was all getting to the point of being animals that I'd bred myself that were then going to be future breeders. So I was like, no, I'm not going to get rid of that. Luckily, again, my mum was looking after that collection, so I can't thank her enough. And then slowly but surely, I've been sort of giving it to friends more than selling it. Literally the last bit went a couple of weeks ago. So there's nothing there. My mum's super happy now. Obviously, she's like, Chris, you love it over there. You got to get rid of this stuff. But it's, as you know, once you've built up a collection, it's hard to do that. You just like, I might not ever get this stuff back.
Yeah. So when it comes to farms, what does a farm mean? Are they wild caught animals that are they collecting gravid animals, or are they F1, F2 animals that are they selecting for holdbacks? Like how does that work? And I'm sure it's not universal across the board with, farm produced animals and everything.
Yeah, I can only speak to what we do here and what's meant to happen. I haven't actually visited any of the farms or knows what's going on, but there's the species are split. There's protected species over here. There's non-protected species with a wild caught quota, and then there's some bits in between. Certain countries you can't export wild caught stuff to, so you still need to breed those species for those countries. So America's quite good. There's quite a few species that there is a wild caught quota you can export as a wild caught quota. Then if you go to Europe, even though there's a wild caught quota, they won't accept that. So you need a captive bred quota, especially some of the pythons. But for example, all of the monitors, pretty much apart from a couple of species, so all of the tree monitors, those are protected in Indonesia, apart from 2 of them. But there's no wild caught quota for any of those, even the 2 that aren't protected. And then the CITES regulation is they've got to be F2 captive bred to be able to export them. So all the tree monitors coming out of Indonesia need to be 2nd generation captive bred.
Okay.
Same with Boland's pythons. They need to be F2 captive bred. And Timor pythons are on that list as well. When you go to some, they're protected over here. And the same for green tree pythons as well. So all of the stuff that's coming off the farms needs to be F2 captive bred as far as the rules go. Then there's other stuff like amethystine pythons. They can be F1, or if countries allow it, you can export those as wild caught. It sort of changes, depends on what it is basically.
Okay, so at your farm, what kind of what all do you have going on there? You've got tree monitors, obviously, and what else? Like what kind of other monitors? What kind of pythons?
As far as the monitors go, near enough every single monitor in Indonesia that's not Komodo dragon. There's so many monitors in Indonesia. There's some really, really obscure, like mangrove monitors from islands that have never been collected from, so there's no found in stock for those. But near enough every single monitor species, apart from Komodo dragons, just because they're so highly protected over here, they just wouldn't give you the quota to export those. So we're looking at probably 30 species of Indonesian monitors. So all the dwarf monitors, 3 species of dwarf monitors, Timor monitors, Offenburgi, and Similis, and then crocodile monitors. Adam, I could sit here and list them all off, but 30 species of pretty much everything you see in the trade we've got here, and we breed. Python wise, again, I can't think of any pythons, Indonesian pythons, we don't have. So Boland's pythons, Timor pythons,
and you guys are reproducing those?
Yeah.
Wow.
All the amethystina, so all your nauta, your Castellepus, all that sort of stuff.
All right, cool. So I definitely want to get into that, but I want to try to remain focused on the on the monitors for right now. I definitely want to get into all the scrubs and and all that. And I want to pick your brain on Timor pythons. But croc monitors, how do you interact with those?
So we just leave them to it. Our enclosures are absolutely massive for the croc monitors, so they don't really need to be hands-on. The only time they are hands-on is the females. I don't know if you can see in the background, I've got an ultrasound machine. So every sort of 10 days, I'll grab the females out and ultrasound them, which has been a really key part in what I'm doing over here and why we're doing so well, I think. It shocked me massively, like some of the females, how skinny they can be, and how they're still producing follicles. And I, as a keeper, we're pretty outside of the countries that I'm in. You see these monitors that are obese to the standards they actually are, what they're meant to be kept. So I look at that as there's no way that thing's cycling. It looks skinny, it looks rag and bones. And you get the ultrasound machine out, and it's full of 20 mil follicles, and wow. You put it with a male, and it locks up. It shocks me every time. I'll try and guess before I get the ultrasound out. I'll be like, oh no, she's got a follicle, she hasn't. Put the machine on, and I've been shocked a fair amount of times.
Wow. And now when you say skinny, you just mean like not an ovulation isn't evident, right? It's not like malnourished or anything.
Just compared to like the tree monitors I kept at home, I would now class as obese because of what I've seen over here. What I've seen in the wild is it's very easy to get a monitor very fat and very healthy. They become very food orientated, but what they're actually meant to look like and what they will breed successfully at is virgin on what we would say was underweight in captivity. It's just the way they're meant to be. They go through different stages. They'll go through times of plenty where they're getting lots of food and they're building the follicles and then times long period of times where they're not getting so much food, and they sort of turn, especially the tree monitors, sort of turn very, very skinny.
Wow, interesting. So it has that kind of with the podcast and everything, and I'm sure that you're advising people on feeding regimens, right? On like how you feed these animals. Has that changed greatly now that you're in Indonesia and you're working with these animals and seeing sort of a more healthy, athletic animal that's reproducing?
Yeah, I warn people all the time. It's the biggest. I mean, monitors, definitely Indonesian pythons, the main, trigger, because they're not getting a cool period in the wild. It's equatorial, so the temperatures are staying. The main trigger is actual cycle feeding. So they're getting, like I said before, they're getting periods of plenty and periods of not. The problem with cycle feeding is if especially with monitors that breed, they can breed every 3 months, every 2 months, compared to a python that breeds once a year. If they don't have a successful reproduction, they store that fat. So you've been feeding them up, and they don't ovulate. They've reabsorbed the eggs. Well, then you've got a monitor that's been fed like it is going to have eggs, and it doesn't have eggs. And then you do that a couple of times, you'll actually end up ruining that monitor. And that was another. To be fair, that's going back to here. That's another issue they had with a lot of the crocodile monitors. We had some absolutely units that were just really, really big, where they tried to feed them to get them to breed. They hadn't bred, and it's very, very difficult to get the weight off of a monitor once you've got it past that sort of stage. Wow. It can take. I was speaking to MJ. He was having a big success with his Prasinus. I was like, I think one of it laid eggs and then hadn't on a second one, and he kept feeding it. And then I was like, it's probably going to take a year now, MJ, to get that female back down to size. And I've done it myself with some of the yellow tree monitors I had back in the UK. They don't go through a successful reproductive event. They'll keep that fat on them, and it's super hard to get it off.
So, really? So they need to be going through a constant sort of bulk and then lean out. Like they need to gain weight and then lean out in order to successfully reproduce.
It works really well if they have a reproductive event. If they lay eggs, it takes all that weight back off them, and then you get to start again. It's that missing of laying those eggs that causes a lot of problems, because we're trying to cycle feed the monitors. People feed, way too many rodents to a lot of the tree monitors. They will eat rodents in the wild, and lizards in the wild, but the mainstay of their food, 80% of their diet is insect based. And there's like this negative feedback loop. It's nice to see your tree monitor eating. You can get them very tame by tongue feeding them. If you're tongue feeding them with pinky mice or small mice, they soon put that weight on, and then unfortunately it's very easy to get it on, a bit like me, really, a bit like anyone. It's very easy to get that weight on and very hard to get it back off again. And that's the trap that you sort of fall into with the monitors, because they need the food as well. You can starve a python with no detriment. I mean, they hold fat as well, but a monitor will not go 6 months without feeding. It has to be fed, every week at least.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the biggest trap. And then just keeping them slightly leaner, so you're able to cycle feed them up to a stage where they're sort of getting into cycle.
I was just listening to the Monitor Brains web podcast the other day with Mike's Monitors and Nick Lillis, and they kind of touched on how these animals they're not puppy dogs. They're not a ball python where you boop the snoot and all that stuff. And what is it? Are there close calls? Is there an element of risk and danger to working with some of these larger monitor species in captivity?
Yeah. And if you get bit by a crocodile, not even an adult one, if you get bit by an adult crocodile monitor, they have such big teeth. If you get, it's just a life-changing injury if you get bitten by any of those, and any of the big monitors really. There's a type of monitor called a Euonoi monitor that we have here. It's called a tricolor monitor. They're not that big, but they've got serious teeth on them. And we use big welding gloves here if we ever have to catch anything up. And occasionally, we'll miss and they'll grab the finger of the glove, and that'll take a good half an hour for that monitor to let go of that glove. I just couldn't imagine, not having the gloves on and being bitten by one of those. I think it might possibly be worse than getting bit by those crop monitors. The crop monitors would be devastating, but fairly quick. They sort of bite and let go. But some of these monitors will hold on. So yeah, they're dangerous, and they command a massive amount of respect. So yeah, they're not to be messed with.
I'm looking at pictures of the tricolor monitors right now. Wow, they are. Some of these are extraordinarily beautiful. Holy cow.
Yeah, I always say if they didn't have that going for them, they wouldn't have much else going for them. They're super stressy. They're quite shy, and they're probably the most defensive monitor that I've ever worked with. I mean, you hear stories of monitors sort of chasing you, or trying to get you out of their cage, and they're actually one of those ones that will do it. But they haven't been captive bred much. I think if we get some captive bred ones and raise them up, they'll be a whole different monitor. A bit like the tokays we were talking about earlier. They could turn into a stunning monitor, and there's not much more beautiful monitors out there than a tricolor.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to bring up the picture here. This is from Cold Blooded Shop.
Yeah,
and let me see here. Yeah, they're really incredible. Now the croc monitors, like when they how much of this is avoiding injury? How much of that is you just staying the hell away from the animal versus reading their body language and understanding what they are thinking? And is like, are you approaching this from understanding like a feed response versus a defensive animal versus an animal that you can tell is willing to tolerate your presence?
We're very lucky here with the size of enclosures, especially for the crocodile monitors. So until you get I'll go in with any single crocodile monitor that we have or that comes in or anything. They're very, they'll tell you what's up. They'll hiss and they'll sort of arch their backs and bluff up way before they'll even bite you. So you got to be doing something pretty silly to get bit. They're definitely not like a massively defensive monitor. Those Uwono monitors are a different story, just because of how highly strung they are. Sort of when you enter their enclosure, they're just, they don't want you in there. They don't want to be touched. Unfortunately, they're very defensive. So those are a bit of a different kettle of fish. But yeah, most monitors will tell you they're not happy. They'll tail whip. They'll sort of blow their throat up and hiss. And it's only when you start to go and try and grab them that you're gonna get a problem at that point. Most will definitely try and get away from you rather than attack you.
Wow. Yeah, it's no joke for sure.
No.
So is that kind of like, in your opinion, what's the best pet monitor? Like if somebody wanted a pet monitor lizard?
Ackie monitors are probably the best all round. The Australian dwarf monitors as a small monitor, they're fantastic. They're handleable. They're small size. They're easy to keep. Fairly easy to breed. Really, you got all the attitude and intelligence of a large monitor and a small one. And to be fair, we got a Simulus, which is an Audatria monitor. So it's still a dwarf monitor, but it's the Indonesian version. It's like an arboreal Ackie, basically. And those are fantastic as well. As a real first monitor, if it bites you, it's not the end of the world. It hurts, but it's not going to give you any life-changing injuries. These big monitors, I think I see these people just carrying them on their shoulders, especially in America and some of these shows and stuff. You're like, do you really? It's like a lack of respect for me. It's like, you really understand that monitor is not enjoying that for a start, and just how quickly things can go wrong. Two of the guys here, one of them has been bitten by a crocodile monitor, and he can no longer use two of his fingers on his left hand.
Whoa!
And then it's just rips his tendons there, and they just don't work. They're permanently fused now on that left hand. And then the other guy wasn't wearing boots, and he got tagged by one of those Uwono monitors, and his foot's like almost paralyzed as well. On the toes on that foot don't work, so they can do some really, really lasting damage. And I couldn't imagine if someone got bitten in the face by a crocodile monitor. It's just it's terrible, but people don't seem to give them enough respect. I mean, you can work with them quite well, especially if you get one from a hatchling. With the crocodile monitors, they're super intelligent, but there's like a level of just respect for each other, even though you might have worked with that lizard for a long time. Just like you were saying earlier, a feeding response where it's not even the monitor's fault and it's just switched over, and you're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, it's wild too, because basically here in America, like anybody can get these animals, which is I feel like that's a good thing, but then at the same time, it's like, what if people that really, like you said, if they don't have that respect, it's kind of like gun ownership, it's things like that, where it's, do you have the adequate amount of respect for what you actually have in your possession now? Are you considering, the possibilities here of what the negative outcomes, a lot of people don't put the thought into that. It's kind of like, seeing people with, macaws and cockatoos and stuff up on their shoulders terrifies me. It absolutely terrifies me. I mean, I worked at a pet store too. I was an assistant manager at a pet store, and I've had a cockatoo get frustrated with me and just clamp down on my thumb and put a pretty significant cut into my thumb on the top and bottom, and it was just the quickest little, like, I'm done with you now. It's time for you to go away. And with a bird that was otherwise really tolerant of my of me being around and everything, and it's
annoying.
I kind of view it.
Sorry, Adam. It's never the animal's fault. I mean, that's a cliche thing to say, but that is 99% of the time, 100% of the time, it's you're messing with that animal. It's in its space, it's in its territory. Doesn't want you in there. It's probably told you several times in any way it can not to come any closer. And you push the boundaries or get complacent sometimes. and accidents happen. But most of the accidents that do happen can be fairly preventable.
Yeah. I'm trying to teach my kids that too with the snakes, and teach them to respect the animals. They've been picking up responsibility with the animals of pulling their water bowls out of their cages and everything. And we have a spray bottle with Listerine on the cart, and in case there is a feed response and something, and I'm just trying to teach them, like, hey, even though the snake 10 times out of 10 might be your best friend, and you can take it out and sit down on the couch with it, and it's the most mellow thing in the world, that 11th time
Yeah.
that you go in the cage, it might view you as a rat, or it might just be keyed in on something, and it's not the animal's fault. And I don't want them to get traumatized, but I'm trying to avoid that situation and trying to keep them very tuned into this could go wrong,
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, a glancing snake bite, and apart from the bigger pythons, is not too bad. I mean, for a child it's bad, obviously, but those feed response, I've had some really bad feed response bites, and you're there with the snake wrapped around your arm, especially a python, for a good while trying to get it off. It's not a nice experience.
No, not at all. I mean, it's not nice. It's never a pleasant experience, because they grab and they're trying to pull you towards them. So their teeth you can feel the pressure, and it's not a fun thing for sure.
And lots of teeth, lots and lots of teeth.
Yeah. So we got to talk about pythons. I want to talk about pythons. So what do you guys keep basically all the scrub pythons? You have Timor pythons, you have Boelen's pythons, and you're reproducing all of them?
Yes. Yeah. Some, like the Bolens, we might get one clutch a year. We've got 5 females, I think it is now. They don't all go every year. That's for sure. But we're pretty lucky on the farm. We're at 500 meters elevation. It's 1,000 and some foot. We're in between 2 volcanoes, but they're not active now. They're 2 mountains. So we get like rolling storms coming through here, very wet. I mean, pretty much ideal for a Boelen's python. And then the tree monitors could do with it a little bit warmer and a little less rain. So we're like ideal for the Boelen's. They're in massive enclosures. We've got sunk in nest boxes that they use for hides and obviously to lay their eggs in. So they don't cause us too much of a problem compared to what they do for other people. And again, the farm's been using multiple males here for a number of years. So Boelen's we're just lucky with, but then we struggle with some of the some of the amethystine pythons that need it a bit hotter. If you get a coolie or a wetter, this year has been particularly wet, we don't get as much production out of those. So it's like swings and roundabouts on a lot of stuff.
Can you get more granular with the enclosures for the Boelen's? Like what size enclosures are they? And are the females all separate? So if you have 5 females, you have 5 separate enclosures. And then how many males do you have? And what does that look like?
So they're a bank of, 10 enclosures. And then I think pretty sure we got 5.5 at the moment. We definitely got 5 females. Might have 4, whatever it is. 5.5. The enclosures are massive. I don't even know what it would be in feet. They're probably...
You can do meters too if you want.
I probably don't know what it is in meters. I need a tape measure to visually do it. Probably 10 foot wide. They're a bit taller, about 8 foot tall, and probably they're split into 2 sections. So they've got, unfortunately, we have to balance stuff outside. So they've got like an insulated back on them, which stays very cold, and then the front is open to the elements. So they're probably 20 foot. That might be over, maybe 15 foot front to back. So they're real big enclosures. Yeah, and there's a row of those. And like I said, the back bit's completely covered. They've got like bamboo shelves in there, and then the floor is leaf litter. And then, like I said, they've actually got like I don't know what gallon it would be. Like a pretty standard bucket size this sort of size, maybe 2 foot. So maybe, I don't know, a foot wide, of these buckets that are sunk into the actual ground, with lids with a hole on top. I've got some videos of it on the Instagram. I don't know if you can add them in with your editing skills, or I'll send you some photos maybe, if you want to. Or if not, they're on my Instagram. But they're real big enclosures, and those just have single animals in them during most of the year, and then they're just cycle fed. Like all the pythons here, they just get cycle fed, and then just introduce males to them. And again, we've got the ultrasound machine now, so I've been helping them a little bit with seeing sort of follicle development, and adding males. The males aren't both in there at the same time. I usually let them breed for a few days and then reintroduce another male. We don't just leave 2 males in with a female. I don't know if you could do that, but it's not what we do here. I haven't seen any sort of much aggression.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, they're too bad. We had 15 eggs this year, and then another clutch of 8, I think it was, off the top of my head. So yeah, like I said, they do really well. But then, the Clastolepus and stuff like that can be a bit more tricky. They might want it a bit hotter. They're in similar size enclosures outdoors. We also keep them indoors as well. So yeah, it's
so how many? So you're reproducing the Clastolepus as well?
Yes, we haven't had massive success with the Clastolepus compared to the Bolans, to be honest. I just think they need it a lot hotter. But we'll get, a clutch a year, sometimes 2 clutches a year, sometimes nothing a year. They're very sporadic. They seem pretty hard to do here. They're, compared to the Bolans, but we're a lot cooler here. We're dropping to the way down to the 50s at night here.
Oh wow.
And then, we got the Clastolepus in similar cages outdoors. But like I said, this year's been extremely wet and extremely cold. And then, they'll do the Clastolepus will do better when it's a warmer year. That's a problem. And it's been a massive learning curve for me, of keeping stuff outside. Obviously in the UK, I couldn't keep anything outside. It's like being a proper farmer now. You're constantly looking up at the sky and hoping for, good weather. For a lot of my monitors and stuff, they need those night temperatures not to drop. Pretty much all monitors will lay their eggs at night, and we have run into some issues this year with a lot of females having like 2 eggs, and then it's got too cold, and then they haven't laid those eggs at the same time. They've held on to them, and then a day or 2 later, they've actually got those eggs. But at that point, they're sort of they're no good. Those 2 eggs that they laid first will be fine. But then the eggs that they've laid, a couple of days later are never any good.
With the Bolans and really with everything, when you're looking at the enclosures, I know that you said that when you got there, the tree monitors were kind of in sort of sparsely decorated, or there wasn't much for them to climb on and everything, and you kind of built those out. Yeah. Was that the case with most of the animals? Were they lacking sort of clutter and therefore security and enrichment?
Most of the snakes are just given like plastic, I don't know how you call it, just like plastic bins that have been turned over. So they were all pretty good, to be honest, and kept fairly simply indoors. Then the outdoors, they had like a few branches. I've added more branches now. And they all had these, they love bamboo over here. Bamboo's super cheap, super easy to work with. So they all had like bamboo basking ledges. So the snakes weren't so bad. It was more the monitors that tend to use them, to get around a bit more, where they were lacking with those. So yeah, it wasn't too much of a problem with the snakes.
Okay. Talk to me about the Nata, the Tannenbar scrubs. How many do you have? How are they set up? And how have you been able to reproduce those successfully?
They're probably the easiest out of all the scrubs, to be fair. I think we've got 4 gravid females at the moment. Wow. They're kept really simply. They're indoors in concrete enclosures, but they don't look concrete. They're painted concrete enclosures, just with a glass front on them. They're fairly tall. They're probably, I don't know, 2 foot wide by about 4 foot high, and then maybe 2 foot deep. So like a arboreal, standard sort of arboreal cage with a couple of crossbars made out of PVC, and then just a hide at the bottom and a water bowl. But they've been fairly easy. Unfortunately, the biggest problem with them is getting the golden patterned ones, which is the natural form of them. All the ones we've got at the moment are the double recessive, which is the ugliest one, unfortunately. So the xanthic patternless, which is a nightmare, really. We've got a few golden ones that are young that we're growing on. They're like stunning. It looks like a completely different snake. It's just annoying how common the the double recessive xanthic patternless are compared to the one that should be there, or not should be there, the natural form of them. But yeah, I mean they're fairly, they seem just like carpet pythons to breed. Those now are compared to your other scrub pythons. Nothing really difficult with those at all.
Okay, and how are you cycling them, like food wise?
So most of the stuff here, we breed all of our own rats and mice, but a lot of the scrub pythons are actually just on quail and chicken. So they're getting mostly that. The ones that we can feed rats and stuff to, we'll obviously feed because we have to buy the quail in. But they're a bit of a nightmare, especially even the bolins. To be fair, all the bolins, none of them will eat rats. They're all on chickens, which is quite expensive. Really? Compared to us breeding the rats. But yeah, they all slow down. So it's sort of similar to what you guys will be doing in America, I'd imagine. So now they're all the food's being reduced for those from October until about March. In March, they just get slammed with lots of food, and then you're sort of getting breedings and eggs being laid from May until about September. The bolins are a little bit different. We can breed them a bit later in the year, so we can still get eggs sort of now. But all the stuff indoors sort of just get shut down from October. They may get fed. I mean, that's another thing they were doing, Adam. They were massively feeding the snakes. That's been quite a bit of not an argument. I was like, you don't need to feed these snakes every week. It's like that's what they were doing for a lot of them.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
For like adult animals, that's so much food.
Yeah, which is probably maybe why they were being quite productive with a lot of the stuff, because these females were in prime condition. But yeah, now I've just got it on a routine, and with just slowing it all the way down, maybe feeding once a month, and then at least having 3 months off, completely off food, but then really slamming them with food when we get into March, April sort of time. And then
so basically everything you have goes off food during the winter time.
Yes. Yeah. Even the monitors, they go from being fed 4 times a week to once a week or twice a week. The big monitors are on once a week. The tree monitors will get fed twice a week, but they're not getting any rodents at that point or anything. They're just on insects. So yeah, they're getting you need that change because they're all the Indonesian stuff's equatorial. They need that the biggest trigger seems to be abundance of food and then not having food. The green street pythons are a little bit different. You can sort of slow them down. They'll breed all year round. You can slow them down for a couple of months, and then sort of ramp them up, and then they'll go if they haven't already, obviously.
What I want to get to see more pythons, but you brought up green tree pythons. I did see your enclosures on those. They're absolutely stunning. They look incredible. Are those made out of like aluminum? They're I don't even know. I think square tube.
Yeah, I don't know if it's aluminum or steel. The mesh is rubbish. We're actually trying to replace a lot of the mesh for stainless steel mesh, which costs 3 times as much. But those they just rust because it's so hot and then so wet all the time. A lot of those we paint them black with like a hammerite type of thing. I don't know if you've got that in the States, it's meant to be galvanized mesh, but you still need to paint it. But it just rusts through. So now we're looking at replacing pretty much everything, and everything new now is going to be with stainless steel mesh. I think it's either aluminium tubing or steel tubing. It's pretty heavy, so I don't think
Okay.
it's alum. We got a welder on site, which is really lucky, and they can knock those
Oh my
cages up
goodness.
they can knock them up in days. It's that's been a real learning curve here of how quickly they can and how cheaply they can build an enclosure. They're good.
Jeez. You're living a dream, you know that, right? You're living in a dream.
Oh yeah. I have to pinch myself. Don't worry, it's not missed on me at all. Even now, I wake up, I look outside, all the I got a load of tree monitors just outside there in outdoor enclosures. They come out and bask every morning, and I pinch myself. I was like, something's gone on here. This can't be real.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on I'm working on keeping my diamond pythons outdoors, and it's been such an arduous process. I have my adult male in a 2x2 and 4 feet tall, like a Reptibreeze enclosure, and he's grating his head on the screening. And I've been working on his large enclosure, which is going to be 3 foot. It's 3 deep, probably about 4.5, 5 foot tall, and then 6 wide. And so he'll be moving out into that soon, and hopefully he'll be able to, stretch his legs, if you will.
Yeah.
And, be able to be a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, it's like, working a full-time job and being a dad and making a podcast and everything. It's like, it's hard to get it. And it's hard to get a contractor out to do the work. Like, I needed mason work to be done on the concrete structure that the wood structure is going to sit up on top of. And, yeah, it's just been painful building one enclosure, and you've got welders on site welding square tube together.
I mean, they're happy with the work, to be honest. We got 30 staff here, including those guys that are pretty much building enclosures or repairing enclosures all the time. And then it's so cheap. If you can build it out of metal or concrete block, like the thermalite, we call it, the blocks that you can cut, not the concrete ones. Sort of thermalite blocks, then they can get it up in days. And they're all using like hand tool, no power tools. You all using hand tools, using bits of string, no laser levels or like proper levels and stuff. And it's just amazing, absolutely amazing. Wow. I thought I designed when I come here the indoor tree monitor room. So we keep a lot of stuff outside, and a bit like I was saying earlier. It depends on how productive it can be. It depends on that year's or that season's weather. As soon as the rain comes in, which is starting to now, it sort of shuts off all of the monitors outside, and they won't breed. So I was like, in England, I was breeding tree monitors every 3 months. So you get 4 clutches out of a female per year, which you never do outside. You get 1 clutch of maybe 2 if you're really lucky, if you've got a good season, but generally 1 clutch out of a female a year. So anyway, long story short, I was like, let's build some indoor enclosures so then we can breed on the off season, basically. So then we have tree monitors available year round for people, because at the moment they're very, very seasonal. And he goes, yeah. So how do you do it in England? So I was like, oh yeah, we use plywood, 18mm ply, do that. And he's like, oh okay. He's like, I'll build them out of concrete. I was like, I don't know how that will work. He goes, no, trust me. I was like, I just can't imagine in my head. I was like, how are you going to do this? He's like, just trust me. Within like a week, they had all the footings in. The half the cages. I asked them to build 20 cages. I think it was. No. We're filling the room. 75 enclosures going in there. I was like, whoa. We don't know if this is going to work or what's going on. He's like, no. If I've got the space, then I'll build it. If it doesn't work, we'll use it for something else. And then just watching these guys get these enclosures up, it would take. It just wouldn't happen in England, and maybe in the States. You would just get a contractor that would turn up for a few days, lay a few slabs down or a few blocks down, and then you wouldn't see him for another month. And you might get your enclosures after a year. I think they got them up in 75 enclosures. I think took them 3 months. That's completely fitted, painted. They've all got real wood offcuts to line the sides. So the concrete you can't even see anymore, so they look really fancy as well. All the I was like, how are you going to get the glass frames in there? He's like, don't trust me. All welded metal frames with glass runners on them and with glass in there. I was like, okay, I'm just going to shut up going forward. You concentrate on building the enclosures, and I'll concentrate on the breeding.
Wow, dude, I can't even imagine what that project cost. like building 75 enclosures out of
Just
concrete indoors?
yeah, just nothing over. Like, honestly, not a lot of money. Maybe I don't know, maybe $5,000.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that, I mean, my diamond python, all in all, is that single enclosure is probably $800, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Same,
And I
same in
did
the UK.
most of it myself, but that concrete base of just sticking block together was $450.
Yeah,
And that was the cheapest quote I could get.
yeah, yeah. It's a different. Well, and luckily we employ pretty much all the staff from the local village and the local area. Like the guy that does all the enclosures literally has his house on the outskirts of the farm, so he just walks into the farm every day and starts building enclosures. But they're really happy with the work. It's good money for them as well, and it's struggle to get jobs in Indonesia. It's a highly dense population in Indonesia, so they're really thankful to have the farm here. And like I said, we employ 30 staff from the local community, so they're super happy, which is nice.
I'm blown away by the enclosure sizes too. Just hearing like the size of the enclosures for the Bolen's pythons is absolutely wild.
Yeah,
Do you think that that's part of the success of their breeding, or do you think it's the fact that you're at the altitude and you're getting the rain and the cool? So during the winter is the rainy season, and it's also cooler, right? So
yeah,
that's when.
it's cooler and wetter here. Yeah,
Okay.
so
Right.
we get like 6 months where it should be pretty dry and very hot. With we still get big storms coming through. It builds up and builds up, and we get some insane storms, like frightening storms. For me, in the UK, we're very, very protected. We don't have any sort of natural disasters. I've had 3 earthquakes here. I've never had an
Whoa.
earthquake before. Not big ones, but it's still like a shock when you haven't been used to them. And then some of the electrical storms and stuff we get here are frightening. But yeah, you will get 6 months of big storms, but not constant rain all the time. And then sort of 6 months where the nighttime temperatures will get down into those low 50s, and then it can be very wet. It can be like a week of rain, basically non-stop, and then a week of pretty good weather. But then it will, in the rainy season, you'll always get more rain than good days.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if the enclosure size, annoyingly, we give them those large enclosures, and a bit like you were saying with your diamonds, they still push. Some of those animals
Really?
will still push, which is just unbelievable. Eventually, they stop, or they go through periods of it. Especially, obviously, when you're not feeding them so much, they'll start looking around and pushing then, which is quite annoying when you've given them, a mansion. um,
Yeah, I mean, you said it was what, 10 feet long and what, 15
yeah,
feet
I think
deep, and
they're I think pretty sure they're 15 foot
jeez,
front to back.
and they're still pushing.
And they will push. Yeah, yeah. Some of them
What the
have,
hell?
got some marks on their noses where they've just been pushing at the mesh. And you just think, but then eventually they sort of settle into it. And if you keep the food this time of year, it's not too bad. But when they sort of go off food, or you reduce the food again, then they start pushing a lot more.
So they're pushing during the cooler months
Yeah, when they haven't
when they're
got
not getting.
yeah.
Okay. And do you think that's them? Like, is it the males that do it, or do the females
Males
do it as
definitely do
well?
it. Males definitely seem to do it more. The males
Yeah.
just seem to be a lot more active than the females. The females um, are just not as active, pretty sedentary. So yeah, definitely noticed it more on the males. But even some of the females will do it. They're just seem to be a pushy snake, a bit like retics are. They're pretty pushy as
Mm.
well.
And when the males are doing this, do you think that they smell the females, and are they trying to get to the females, or do you think it's unrelated? Do they do it when they're paired up?
Um, they seem to be pretty intent on locking up when you pair. If you've timed it right, they're pretty good breeders, and they will definitely just breed for fun.
Okay.
Even when nothing happens. That happens so much. Especially, Castellepus are a nightmare for it as well. They'll just breed
Really?
for fun, and nothing comes out of them. But yeah, I can't say that it's related to anything. They just go through periods of pushing, and then they can be fine for months, and they sort of heal their noses heal up. It's not constant, but yeah, I have noticed it, and just something I didn't think would happen in such a large enclosure. You've got all that
Yeah.
space. It's really kitted out. They're all planted out beautifully. You've got all these hides and stuff, but you're going to go and find that corner and give it a push.
Yeah. I saw on your Instagram that you were like no private sales. So how many people like hit you up and they're like, "Hey man, can you hook me up with X, Y, and
Inundated.
Z?" Or
Yeah, I feel rude, but I honestly, it's not being rude. I get inundated with stuff, and it goes mostly into that requested message folder. Well, I try and help people out as much as I can. You know, I get the really stupid stuff of like snake question mark price, or like people wanting to get stuff like illegally and stuff like that, which obviously we don't do. But
yeah,
I try. We've got distributors literally in pretty much every country where you can get this stuff. So the States, we've got Michael Cole, who distributes stuff, and then Ashley in Canada. We've got a few dotted around, you know, Europe. So I try and just push them to the distributors. Annoyingly, you give them that option, which a lot, you know, to be honest, no other farm's going to give you that option. They just don't deal with anyone. They're not. Me being here, obviously, I've pushed Prestasi onto social media, which, you know, it took a lot of work, but I just wanted to show the good work that we're doing here, and you know, we're actually doing stuff legitimately. That took a lot of work to, you know, convince the owner and the partners that, you know, they've been so secretive, and the other farms are still so secretive about stuff. So it does annoy me a little bit that people have got me as an option to speak to, and I'm super helpy, super helpful to try and give them to those distributors. But then they'll just fall out me saying, "Oh, I want to do my own shipment." You're like, well,
mm.
we've got our customers. Unfortunately, they can distribute the snakes, and oftentimes they just want like one or two things, and I just don't think they've made that connection that maybe we are a big, you know, a big wholesaling farm, really.
Do you think that sometimes the secrecy is actually detrimental to the whole farm raised thing? Because I have to admit, you know, sometimes when you see farm raised, you're like, what does that even mean? You
Yeah,
know, what does that mean? Like, what is it a wild caught animal that somebody went out and grabbed that was gravid, and then you got the eggs and you incubated them and that's it? Or, you know, but like hearing this, it's like I feel like being more transparent, talking about it, having the the images out there, it's like, oh man, this is like this would be like if somebody was doing this in America, you'd be like, oh heck yeah, like it would be incredible, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I can't talk on the other farm. I haven't even been to any of the farms, and I'm sure they wouldn't even let me in. And I'm sure they're very annoyed with me. I've probably got a price on my head, maybe because I've put it out there so much.
God, I
I know
hope not.
they were definitely annoyed when I first came over, because the owner got a few calls from the other farms saying, "What are you doing?" basically. But yeah, it's like the greater picture. We get a lot of we're battling with that blue tree monitor ban that come into the US, which has been lifted at the moment. But just trying to, you know, put it out there that at least one farm is doing stuff as they should be.
Talk to me about the blue tree monitor ban. Like what I'm not aware of it. So if you could fill me
Okay.
in on that.
Yeah, so basically, in the States, you have a thing called an ESA, an Endangered Species Act, which
Hmm.
sounds perfect for your guys' native animals, indigo snakes and stuff like that, and some turtles and stuff I know are on there. Obviously, I'm not from the States, so I'm not massively in on what it does, but from what I can understand, it's meant to protect your native wildlife. So it can't be traded across, it can't be traded at all, it can't be taken over state lines and that sort of thing. America, for whatever reason, has decided to look outside of their own country, and then looked at the imports of blue tree monitors, for example. You guys were one of the biggest importers of blue tree monitors worldwide, which sounds really bad, but you're also one of the biggest countries in the world with the most amount of people in them. So, you know, swings around, but you're always going to be importing more stuff than, say, a country like the UK, which has a smaller population and less reptiles,
Yeah.
isn't there? So they were saying, for some pretty old evidence and some very, I don't know, non-scientific based scientific papers, if you want to call them that. So basically, some stuff that had been published not by scientists, but very, very anecdotal evidence of the depletion of blue tree monitors in the wild, which may be going on, may not be going on, but it shouldn't really affect you guys importing them, because you guys are only ever allowed to import legal ones from farms, which the same caveat and a bit like why I'm trying to put everything out there, that we are breeding this stuff here, is there was a few reports and stuff that maybe the animals were coming from the wild and getting laundered through the farms, which I'm sure has happened in the past, may still be going on now. But the biggest detriment to you guys was so many people in the States now are breeding them, captive breeding them, and this ruling stopped. Like my good friend Brian Susan, he wouldn't be able to sell his captive bred monitors that have been bred in the States to another state. That would become illegal, basically. And then, so they put in a temporary ban of 260 days, which is literally just last month has ended, and they haven't made their decision yet on whether they're going to ban them or list them. And what level they list them. There's a few different levels. They can outright ban the imports and anyone being able to trade with them. And then there's like a middle ground, or there's just we leave it how it is now. So yeah, it's there's a lot of, the point I was making. There's a lot of pressure from anti-groups with quite old information that might have been right 20 years ago. Maybe the farms weren't as good as they are 20 years ago, but now I'm trying to put it out there that at least we are doing it correctly. And to be fair, this week we just had an audit from CITES, the management authority in Indonesia, and their scientific department, and they're actually going around all the farms at the moment doing an audit to make sure we've got the correct stock, we've got the right cages, we can feed them, our record keeping is up to date. So I don't know what happened when these reports are written 20 years ago, but even Indonesia has stepped up, from what I can see, to make sure things are being done right.
So to me, what it sounds like is we need to make sure that the farms that we're importing animals from that are, being exported to the United States are not laundering wild caught animals, right?
Yeah.
They don't have poachers going out, grabbing animals, bringing them to the farm. And then the farm, like you said, launders them, sends them to the US. Yeah. That sounds like it would be a legitimate problem, especially for the native populations, right? But you need to, it seems like that's a problem that needs to be dealt with instead of just cutting off all import of of captive bred animals, right?
Yeah, I mean that's where it was completely farcical, and a lot of us went on a public hearing and say the last 5 to 10 years of monitor keeping, especially tree monitors, there's never been as many captive bred tree monitors out, and we're literally getting to the stage where America could, in the next 5 years, not actually need any imported animal, any imported blue tree monitors, apart from maybe to give to those breeders for fresh blood, basically. You don't want to cut it off completely, because then you get the same sort of thing that happens with the Australian stuff, where the stuff starts getting inbred a lot and you start getting problems. But it's a lot easier for some guy or someone in the States to buy off a breeder in the States, FedEx the same day, and have a legitimate captive bred animal, and you're stopping the work that's been done the last 10 years. It's a little bit, and I've said it on my podcast, it's a little bit down to the hobby itself. Like the old school type of keeping, we used to publish a lot of stuff that we were doing in books and in papers, even though it was in captivity, and that's completely dropped off from what I can see now. A lot of people aren't actually publishing the results they're having. I can, even myself included, we're not publishing that data. So these scientist groups that aren't in the hobby, they can only go on and look at peer-reviewed, research. If that research is from 20 years ago and nobody's bothered to publish in the last 2 years how much success we're actually having with a lot of these reptiles, especially monitors, then how are they to know any different? And I think they were quite surprised when all of us come on and said this, but they were like, well, how are we to know about this? So we've lost that part of the hobby a bit, Adam, where back in the 90s, early 2000s, people were really putting stuff out there. And I think it's got a lot to do with social media. People put their successes on social media. Everyone goes, oh yeah, that's amazing. But it's not actually ever documented anywhere someone outside the hobby would ever see it. So I'm pushing for that. A lot of the stuff I'm doing now, I'm writing, egg sizes, dates of hatching, egg measurements, breeding, and then just putting those into scientific papers so they get logged. And there's quite a few established journals and stuff now in the States and in Europe, you can quickly just put a little note together. I was successful in breeding blue tree monitors. They had this many eggs, this many hatched out, one died, and then that gets, that can be used as future reference for these scientific organizations that need that data.
So you think that this is because of social media, that what used to be poured into books, and literature about reproducing animals, now it's all for the gram or TikTok.
I'm guilty of it 100%. I think it takes just an extra step. It's so easy to upload your photo of your pictures of your lizards or your snakes breeding, the pictures of the eggs and them hatching, put it on your page. And, whether you're doing that for likes or clicks or just because you want people to see, which is what I do it for. But what I'm saying is the old school where they didn't have that, the way to show everyone that they'd done something was put it into some literature. And that literature stays around. I've posted stuff now that I'd never be able to find on Facebook. I wouldn't even know how to get the stuff I posted back. Where if you put it into a book or put it into some sort of official literature, it stays there a lot longer. And I just think we've lost that part of the hobby a little bit. So I commend everyone just to write a little note in a herp journal or anything. If you have a bit of success, it makes the hobby look a lot better. The zoos are very good at it. The zoos have any sort of success with anything, they write a paper about it and it gets logged. Where we're probably having way more success in the private sector, but none of it's getting logged and nobody knows about it. Unless you're in the hobby, nobody's going to know that you've been this successful with Boland's pythons, with anything really.
So that's definitely a problem, right? And it sounds like you've identified it. Now, what can we do as keepers to combat that problem and try to contribute to what used to be? How can we do that?
So unfortunately, we had an amazing one for monitors, which was called BioWac, which was like a quarterly journal that was peer reviewed by legit scientists, and that was where everyone used to do anything to do with monitors. That's where it went. I emailed Robert, who used to sort of be the head of that. He hasn't got back to me. I just think he's swamped under, and it hasn't been published for a long time. So I'm currently looking at the best next thing. In the States, I don't know. You must have like a legitimate herp journal that's sort of peer reviewed to some point, and I'm sure they're always crying out for articles because a lot of these places are. And it's just getting it into one of those that can be referenced for future dates, basically. Instead of just putting it on the internet, write up a little note, get it into one of these journals, and then it's there. And they're not like snobby that they don't want the data or they don't want you to publish. I just think it's so easy now just to do a post, isn't it? But that if you just took a little bit of data, the sort of things they want to know is, a bit like the questions you're asking me now on the podcast is, what do you do? How did you do it? How much success did you have? The eggs that you got, they always want measurements of the eggs, and then just weigh the babies as a very simple one. And then how many of the babies survived?
Oh my gosh. So you're telling me my podcast is part of the problem?
No. I mean, podcasts are good because it's not like a social media feed. Podcasts are sort of replacing books in a way, where as long as we keep them on a server and keep they're going, you can type in, Chris Applin monitors, and I'm sure it will come up for years to come. So it's there. I don't know how referenceable it is for a scientific organization to I don't know if we're at that stage now where they can actually cite a podcast. Because there's no peer review with what we're doing, but at least it's logged. There's NPR episodes that they've been doing for 15 years or whatever. You can still go back for 15 years and look at them. I just don't think a scientist will probably bother to listen to all this waffle that we're going through just to get to my little section. So it's easier for them just to have some sort of literature where they can cite it. Okay, Adam bred Timor pythons in 2026. He had this much success with them.
God,
it's all cited. And they can put that and they can cite that in the paper. A lot of the stuff with this ESA ban, they were using papers from early keepers 20 years ago that were dealing with wild caught tree monitors and having real bad success with them. But unfortunately, that's the data they had when we were good at it, and people were writing journals, whether they were successful or not. And then there's been 20 years of nothing. So they've just gone, well, nobody's published anything to say it's got any better. So we're guessing that it's still as bad as it was 20 years ago.
Wow. Dude, that's wild.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that. Nobody's really ever brought that up before. At least that I've, like in all this is episode 91. I haven't really talked to anybody where that's been brought up as a problem. So what and you're actively combating this problem? Are you're logging and trying to get this stuff put into the literature?
Yeah, I've got papers and papers of stuff here. So it's all handwritten for me at the moment. And then literally what I'm doing is writing down the pairs when they have eggs, how long after the breeding it was, how long the eggs took to hatch, and then how many were successful, the weights, the measurements of the eggs, the length of the eggs, the width of the eggs, how many, if they laid 8, how many were actually successful. If she laid 8, but as with all incubation, 2 of them might go bad, or half of them might go bad, or whatever it is. And then when they hatch, just measuring the babies and weighing the babies, writing that down. And then I'm literally just looking for somewhere to publish it at the moment. I bred O-ball monitors. There's no documented breeding of O-ball monitors, even though the farm I'm in has been breeding them for years. I asked the owner, I was like, have you ever published this anywhere? I said, no. I said, well, that's why they don't think we're breeding anything, because you've never put it anywhere. So I skewed around, and nobody's in as far as anyone from the outside looking in would see, nobody's ever bred an O-ball monitor before. So I was like, right, I'll document that, and then that'll be the first documented case of them being bred in captivity. But there's lots of things that can be done, and all how far we've come in the hobby. It would be nice to now see how successful we were. Python breeding's come a long ways. I'm sure nobody's bothering to, write a short little thing about, their clutch of whatever it is. Stephen Cush is breeding scrub pythons through the wazoo. He's like on the forefront. They haven't been bred very much in history. He needs to start. Sorry, Stephen, to put you on the spot, mate. But he's like a key one as far as I can think of python species to start logging that stuff down. Because, there could be a ESA next on scrub pythons. Too many scrub pythons are coming in from the wild or from the farms or whatever you want to call it. Nobody's bred them in Americas because we've looked through all the literature and nobody's bred them. But yet, Stephen's been super successful with them. But unless he writes that down and gets it going, they just won't know about it. And that's what the most frustrating thing with this tree monitor ESA ban was for me, is like we were all talking to each other going, well, we've been breeding them loads. There's never been as many captive bred tree monitors, but as far as they were concerned, well, where's all the evidence of it? So
well, that's got
me on my soapbox
now. No, it's good. I mean, it's like the Halmahera scrubs. Are they Tracy-I? Yeah, Tracy-I. I know he had great success with them. So yeah, Stephen, bro, you got to start publishing your stuff. You got to start,
find a job. Like I said, unfortunately I don't, and I'm searching for one for monitors for myself. I might even have to use an Indonesian, they publish a lot of stuff on Indonesian reptiles. I might have to just tailor onto one of theirs, but there will be an avenue for getting stuff published basically in the States, or somewhere, even some of the European ones. I'm sure would be happy just to note it down. And the information's there. It was a part of when I was coming up in the hobby. It was quite a big part of it to document what you knew, because that's how other people found out about it. And as good as social media is, it just gets lost in the ether. It's just, you post it one day and a week later, it's pretty hard to find that post again.
Footprints in the snow.
Yeah.
It's so what about a book? Or like, can you talk about what you're writing?
Yeah. So I've been talking about writing a tree monitor book since I first went to Batanta to find blue tree monitors in the wild. And And a bit like we've just been talking about, it's very easy to talk about it, but it's very hard to actually put pen to paper. So I've probably been, talking about it for 2 years, and then really in the last 6 months, I had Nick Mutton and Ryan Young go on a trip with me, and Nick's wrote a fair few books. He's like, just write it, Chris. Just start writing it. The first edition can be whatever, but just start writing it, or else you'll never do it. So from sort of March time, as soon as they left, I started writing it, and now I'm, near enough all the way through it.
No
It's been
way.
amazing. Yeah, really. I'm super lucky here. I've got no TV, nothing really going on at night. So every night I've just been writing the book. But it becomes massively addictive, and really enjoyable. But also the amount of respect you'll get from anyone that's written a book is just as there's so much you have to think about, and so much that goes into it, so much tinkering and writing stuff, and then the day later reading it again and just saying that's absolute rubbish. So it's just back and forth, but it's a very enjoyable process. Well, I'm finding it very enjoyable. So yeah, hoping to get that done. I didn't really want to write the captive side of it. I really enjoy the natural history side of it a lot more. But I've been concentrating now on the captive side of it, which has been quite eye-opening. You learn a lot, but from writing a book, you learn so much that you just didn't know, because you have to do so much research into stuff, especially on the breeding side of stuff. This is probably the biggest sort of epiphany I've had with breeding stuff. Is we all think about the cycling of females, of getting those follicles up to size and then getting ovulations. But the males also need to cycle. The testes swell during certain times of the season, especially monitor lizards, and pythons will do it as well. We're all complaining about infertile eggs or infertile clutches, and everyone keeps looking at the females. But you got to think the males need to go through the same sort of cycling. You might be putting a female in there that's absolutely cycled to she's got follicles in there, but that male it thinks he's out of season. His sperm production is low. And then he's, thinking, what's going on? We've got a female in here all of a sudden. I'll breed with her. And then we complain that we've got infertile eggs at the end of it. So, and the other, caveat to that is, especially for pythons, how much do we not feed our male pythons? It's like a known thing. Oh yeah, you don't need to feed your males. You can keep them super skinny. You don't want a big lazy breeder. But if he's not getting the same triggers, especially for this Indonesian stuff, if he's not going from a period of nothing to frequent meals, then he's not going to start producing sperm. And yeah, so that's been like a big thing. There's a lot that goes into the breeding process, especially with the monitors. They need like an environmental trigger to produce some of these hormones before they even start thinking about building follicles. There's like a chain of reaction of, an environmental trigger. Maybe the rainfall in Indonesia is the first trigger. It's like a slight trigger. And then the abundance of food is another one. And that actually makes the monitor start producing enzymes in the liver that start yolking those eggs up. So there's like a chain reaction. And if you're missing a few of them, it's why a lot of these females will reabsorb, or they won't go into a cycle at all. But as I've just been talking about females again, that same cycle needs to be with the male as well. You've got to be cycling your males as much as your females.
Is the temperature cycle important for them as well for like the quality of their sperm, like a cooling period?
So for the Indonesian stuff, it doesn't seem to be, it doesn't make sense, / it doesn't seem to be that much of an issue, because it's so stable over here. We're talking about a drop of maybe 5 degrees. But it seems to be more rainfall and then the abundance of food. Definitely your Australian stuff and some of those other pythons, they will go through a true sort of cool down period. And then I haven't looked into the viability of the sperm, if it cools, if that's an old wives' tale or what it is, or again, that is literally just them having a period of off, and then the trigger is it coming back on. I'm not sure with reptile sperm whether it's affected like it is with mammal sperm with temperature.
Yeah, because I know that's definitely a thing with mammals.
Yes, It could be with reptiles. I haven't looked into it because I'm obviously looking at equatorial monitors. It
Sure.
makes absolutely no sense. If you look at the whole range of tree monitors, that temperature doesn't drop in any significant way, but the rainfall and therefore the abundance of food changes dramatically throughout the seasons.
Do you think, going back to this whole social media thing and how it's kind of changing scientific research and what people are finding in their experiments essentially that are being done at home, whether you like it or not. I mean, reproducing the animal is producing data, right? And that data is not getting logged. It's not getting passed on to the academic side of all of this. Do you feel like that's the same thing with herping, that a lot of people are going out herping, they're putting their stuff up on their reels and their
Yeah.
posts, but it's not getting published anywhere? What they're finding, what they're observing, the temperatures, all that, it's essentially going out into a void that is not academic.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And this is why pretty much the excuse for writing a book was in the first place. You need a research permit for a lot of the stuff. If people go on herp tours, which is fine in some cases, but then the country, especially like Indonesia, they would, if you're doing proper research of taking data and stuff like that and then publishing that in a scientific journal, it becomes a bit tricky with whether you need a scientific visa for that, because you're not really going on holiday and doing a bit of herping at that point. You're coming to their country and then taking scientific data that you're publishing. Indonesia, for example, if you want to do any scientific work over here, they expect you to use an Indonesian scientist to publish with and do that research with, which makes complete sense. They want to support their own scientists. They're a bit sick of people coming over here, taking data, publishing it, and then the scientists losing out on that. So the herping one's a tricky one. I don't know if Australia would see it the same way or other countries see it the same way. So that's a tricky one. I think you'd have to work more with a scientist for that side of things. Because really, if you're coming on holiday to do a bit of herping, that's
Yeah.
not coming over to research. And Indonesia, I know for a fact, they have a separate research visa for the reasons I sort of just explained there.
Okay. You said like the herping trips that, that's fine in some cases. So can you kind of dig into that a little bit more? Like what's good? What's bad? What are some of the drawbacks to it?
That mainly talks to Australia, where their animals are so protected that a lot of the herping that gets done is completely illegal there. As in, you shouldn't be touching anything, pretty much any plant or animal in Australia, you shouldn't be interacting with.
Mm.
So, and you know, people run into a lot of trouble over there doing that, maybe not realizing. And I'm not quite sure how a lot of these big tours that post pictures that are obviously posed, and even some of these YouTubers that are grabbing animals and posting them, the legalities of that side of things. So just be wary, especially with Australia, on that side of things, because they have some strict laws. But
Wow.
yeah, it's just something to think about. I was just thinking of Australia then, where I've seen a few things. I've gone over to Australia and had a few issues myself. I've been pulled over by rangers saying, "What are you doing?" And been treated like a criminal at the side of the road and taken a lengthy explanation to that I'm just taking photos. But you can get yourself into a lot of trouble, especially if you're caught holding anything over there, and a ranger in your national park and a ranger finds you holding anything. Then it's completely illegal, really.
Yeah, it's I get it. I get it from both sides, right? Like you want to respect the animals, especially ones that are protected. You want to give them space and not interrupt whatever kind of behavior they're in. Then at the same time, it's like, is the animal laying in the middle of the road? Is it about to be hit by a car? Can
Yeah.
you hook it and get it off to the shoulder?
I had, I had the same argument with the ranger. I was like, I probably saved 10 thorny devils on the way up by getting out my car and chasing them off the road. So you're telling me that's illegal? And he just said, well, you're just being sarcastic now, obviously. I was like, no, but if you thought I was doing that, and it sort of got into a bit of back and forth of yeah, it's pretty much illegal, really. You can run it over, but if you got it out and picked it up and I found you, then I'm going to think the worst of you and think you're smuggling it, basically. But
Isn't
you
that
just got to
crazy?
respect these countries' rules. Indonesia is very, very strict on some of the animal laws we got here. It's just being very aware of it and not being stupid, really. And
Yeah.
you can easily get locked in Indonesia. You can get locked up for some of the smallest of things that wouldn't be a problem in your own country. Just cultural things. You do something a bit silly at one of the temples in Bali, then they really frown upon that, and you can end up with some serious jail time just
Wow.
from what they see as disrespect, what you don't really understand. So you got to just respect the culture and respect the country that you go into. And like I said,
Yeah.
Australia is very, very strict on their wildlife. That is one of the things.
Yeah, I was herping out in the Everglades, right? And they had these signs up on the road that we were herping that said, watch out, crocodiles crossing the road. And we're like, what? Like there's no way that we're going to see a crocodile, And sure enough, we saw one. A big one laying right on the side of the road, and I wanted to get a picture with it, so I'm like probably 15, 20 feet, behind it, but in focus, and just obviously just trying, like you just said, like respecting obviously the laws, but the animals at the same time. And then we ended up finding a guy that worked at the park, and we said, yeah, we saw these signs out on the side of the road, and he said, yeah, some guy was in his truck going 55 down the road and hit a gravid female and just sprayed the eggs all across the highway, and obviously killed her, destroyed the clutch, so they had to put these signs out.
Yeah.
Why you need to go speeding through a park like that, I don't know. Why did you hit the crocodile on purpose? Like, how do you not see a gravid crocodile, to be able to slow down? And it's disgusting, it really is. So I get it. And then in other things, I think that people like us that really love these animals should be able to, help them cross the road or get them to safety without being persecuted.
Yeah. Like I said, he sort of said to me, yeah, if we could clearly see that you were just getting out and getting it off the road, then we probably couldn't do anything about that. But again, just his word to me, and he was a really sound guy. Once he knew I was up to not up to no good, sorry. We had a conversation. He seemed like a bit of a herper himself. He could sort of things that he's like, yeah, don't, if you do see something, don't pose it. And he was sort of giving me the eye of just don't get caught doing that or whatever it was. Their massive thing in Australia is the amount of people that go over there and smuggle stuff out, which I can see is a big problem over there, and stealing their wildlife, really. But there's this middle ground of, well, I'm sure every smuggler that gets caught says he's just taken a photo of the lizard, so he's got to treat everyone as if they're the absolute worst over there. So, yeah.
Do you think that if they regulated exporting animals out of Australia, that it would solve the problem of illegal export? Like if you could actually if they could run farms in Australia and farm some of these animals and have a quota of what could be collected annually and then captive bred and have it really well regulated and exported. I know it's never going to happen, but do you think that would solve a lot of those illegal issues?
Yeah, definitely. But then you run into the same sort of issues that's been said about over here, as how trustworthy are the people doing it. It's a lot easier just to go and get one out of the wild and then say it's captive bred. I mean, Australia are probably in a way more advanced solution with DNA testing of stuff. They could probably prove it a lot better than, unfortunately, we can in Indonesia. We're way behind that. I'm sure that might even come in the future. So yeah, I think there'd be ways of doing it. And if you look at species that are Australian, nobody's going to Australia to smuggle a bearded dragon. It's just they're out there. They've been super successful with them. It'd probably be nice to get a few more lines of it, but nobody's bothering to going over there and smuggling to get them out. It's only the stuff really that we haven't got in captivity. And luckily we've been very successful with a lot of that Australian stuff. There's only a few species I can think of that have come out and not actually been established in captivity.
Mm. Are you still herping regularly? I mean, I would assume being where you're at now, you'd be able to, but I mean, like, what kind of hours are you working? Are you working 7 days a week and like 12-hour days just because you're there and you're passionate about it?
Yeah.
Or like, what does
Yeah.
that look like?
I've got no set hours, so I'm not like employed with the farm. I'm a partner of the farm whereas it comes to captive breeding, so I can come and go as I want. But obviously, being passionate and living on site, I'm here every day, obviously, and want to get things done. But then I will take off extended periods, which is another really good thing about this job. Even though it doesn't pay as well as the electrician stuff did, I've just come back from Papua New Guinea, Raja Ampat, where I did a week of herping there, and then I've got my mum coming over in November, so I'll go off for 3 weeks with her and not feel that guilty about it, as long as everything's sorted here. So it's sort of working your own hours, but I can't go for extended periods. But I'm definitely doing more. Well, I've definitely got more not free time, annual leave, if you want to call it, than I would in a regular job. In England, I think you get 3 weeks or 4 weeks annual leave per year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using that all on herping, where now, what I try and do now is not stay away for extended periods. So maybe I'll go for a week herping, come back for a week, and then go for another week, and sort of change it like that. Or during the breeding season, I'll be here the whole time. So I try and make it fair to the guys that I've got working here, and obviously they're not up on a lot of the stuff that, when it comes to the breeding side of things, that I need to be here for. But yeah, I do a lot of herping still, and I'm now 4 hours away from Australia, which was my favorite place to herp.
Wow.
It's a 4-hour flight, and from England it's near a 24-hour flight to get over there. So I'm spoiled.
Jeez.
Yeah, very spoiled.
Wow. Man, I'm gonna hit you up when I start planning some herping expeditions.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, Australia is the place to do it. That is, if you haven't done, I mean, for pythons and stuff would be amazing. Indonesia, some parts can be good, but it's like a different level. If you haven't done real herping, then Australia is sort of the mecca for how much stuff you see and how easy it is and how comfortable it is. And then once you've sort of cut your teeth in the Australian stuff, then the Indonesian stuff comes a bit later.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping that my first legit herping trip out of the country is going to be to Paraguay to see Argentine boas in the wild.
Nice. Yeah.
I'd really love to do that. I think that would be awesome. They're like one of my favorite snakes for sure.
Timors might be possible, just thinking about stuff that they're not too far from where I am, and it's a safe part of Indonesia. So that you can go to Flores. Sorry, not Flores, Rinca. They got their own sort of Timor type there. They turn up quite regularly now, so that'd be a good one for you as you're into your Timors.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing up Timors, because I forgot to ask you, like, how do you have those set up, and how are you breeding them?
Those are all indoor at the moment, but we're doing the same. They're literally being built at the moment. They're going to go in the same as what the Bolans have got, basically. Okay. Outdoors. At the moment, they're in a mix of some plastic cages that are about 4 foot by 2.5 foot deep by maybe 3 foot high, and then some big outdoor enclosures, but they haven't really got the same sort of outdoor space that the Bolans have. We don't have massive success with the Timors for the amount we have, so we're thinking maybe moving them outside like the Bolans are might be helpful for those. But yeah, the indoor enclosures, they've got an area they can bask in natural sort of sunlight on those bamboo ledges again, and then they've got big concrete nest boxes in there. But yeah, they're not one I say we've really cracked. They're not, like, for the amount of animals we have, we've probably got, I don't know, maybe 20 Timor pythons. We're getting a couple of clutches per year, maybe 3 clutches on a really good year, but they're not consistent like we've got some of the other stuff going. But again, same sort of freedom regiment, slamming them with food, and then just introducing them. But again, they're a bit like the castellepus. They'll breed a lot, and then the females will reabsorb a lot of the time.
Interesting. I wonder what causes that.
I don't know. Here, it might be to do with temperature. I think where they come from in the lesser sundas is very hot, and then we struggle with keeping them very hot for a long period of time. So that might be an issue with them, and I think that's the same with those castellepus as well. I think it's fairly hot where they come from.
So they need a really hot summer, and then
and then they're
not too much of a temperature drop during the winter.
Yeah, they'll have a little bit more than some of the Papuan stuff, like your green trees and stuff. But they're getting very wet. I'd imagine. They're, like I said, they're only 3 islands away from where we are. Really, you got us in Java, then you got Bali, and then you're getting into sort of the lesser sundas. So I'd imagine they're getting quite a lot of rainfall during a period of the year. And then I'm sure, well, I know from being there, it's very hot and very dry. It's almost like grassland, savanna areas that they're found in.
Interesting. How big are yours? Your females?
Some of them are massive, good, 9 foot. But then we've got some that are fairly small. The males are fairly small. Maybe it's always hard to say, and they're not the greatest things to get out, as you're probably well aware. We try to leave them alone as much as possible, not for the biting aspect at all, from the piss and
it's the pee.
They are something else. They're into some kinky stuff, or whatever you want to call it. They just like pissing and shitting all over you, really. So you tend to leave them alone. Probably some of our males are probably only 5-6 foot. And then the females, we've got females that are bred pretty small, around the same sort of size. But then we've got some giants. But we got some snakes here that are 15 years old. They're some really old stock of pythons, and
wow.
they were being fed once a week at one point.
My word!
We got some monster amethystine pythons, like just absolutely giant ones. I didn't even know they got that big. Some of the
how big around?
Oh, like big, yeah. Big.
Wow.
And massive,
so
great big massive heads on them.
Wow, like a small plate, essentially.
Yeah.
Wow.
Definitely probably too big to what they should be, really.
Shoot.
But yeah, they were having it a good time before I got here. They were having some good food.
Oh man. Yeah, I have 2.1 Timors, and I think I'm gonna go down to just a pair.
Yeah.
After talking to Andy Carbon and hearing how big his female is, which I think is 8-9 foot long.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I think I just need a pair. But I feeding the males essentially the same as the female.
Yeah.
The males are so much smaller. It's wild how having them on the same diet, the female just exploded in size.
Yeah.
And the males are just kind of lagging behind. It's interesting.
Yeah, we definitely haven't got any giant males. I'm just thinking through all of them now. Yeah, it's all the females that are noticeably bigger for sure. But even a 9 foot one, when it's curled up, doesn't look 9 foot. They're pretty, as long as they're not overfed, they're pretty slender. They're very sort of scrubbish in a way. They're sort of in between a scrub python and a retic is the best way I could describe them, as you're probably well aware.
Yeah, it's like a dwarf retic kind of mixed with a scrub python.
Yeah,
that's
like beautiful things.
Oh, they're gorgeous. I just wish that they'd stop peeing on me, And it's like once they get out and they dump that pee, then they're usually good. My female the other day, for the first time, she was really skittish. I was doing some maintenance, and all of a sudden it was like something switched in her head where she was like, "I don't need to run from you." She all of a sudden she just kind of coiled up and looked at me like you should go, you should get out of my cage now.
Yeah.
And
they can be a pain. They can be striky when they want to be, but they're just not like scrub like. Scrubs are pretty keyed in, and that when they strike, they usually hit you as well. where the Timors would much rather seem to get away, and especially if you pick them up. I don't think I've ever had many of them strike at me once you picked them up. They just do that musking and peeing.
Yeah. Good old Timor pythons. So they need a hot summer. And
for sure, it gets ridiculously hot. I've been to Flores and to Rinca. I didn't find any of the Timors on Rinca. Obviously, seen the dragons over there, and they're sharing the same habitat. And it's the best way I can describe it is like hilly grassland that gets extremely, extremely hot. I don't know where they are actually found on those grasslands or where they occur. Really, I never really looked into it. That would be a really good herping trip to go and actually find them, not on Rinca, but actually find them on the lesser Sundas and see where they're actually being found. Because I don't know if much has been written on that.
So they're insular, but they're on the mainland as well.
Yeah. So there's one type which is almost like a patternless morph of a Timor that you find on Rinca, which is there's Komodo National Park. Everyone knows Komodo Island. There's also other islands, and they seem to find them. I don't know if any actually been found on Komodo Island. Probably have, but a lot of them turn up on Rinca, which is just another small island that still has Komodo dragons on. But yeah, they're found on the mainland in Flores.
Interesting. I wonder. So, are the ones from Flores are they larger because they're on the mainland, or does it not really make a difference?
Comparing, they look very similar. Those ones on Rinca I've seen, they definitely weren't dwarf ones from what I remember. They just look like a very patternless Timor, basically.
Okay. My ADHD brain, dude, I'm all over the place because I wanted to ask you about Timors before, and then somehow I forgot because I kept putting it off. And then, I just had a thought about the book as well. You had mentioned the natural history, but you are incorporating husbandry and captive care into that book as well?
Yes. So that I've sort of alluded to it. That was like the least bit I wanted to do was the captive side of it. But it does teach you a lot on like when you're writing a book, you have to write it as you're explaining something to like, this should be like the best level of care, the best way of doing that. And we sort of all get complacent in our husbandry, and then writing it out, you sort of think, oh yeah, I should be doing that. I'm preaching about it, but I should be doing that as well. So yeah, there's a big captive care sort of husbandry side, a lot of stuff on diet with lizards in particular, which you don't have with snakes. Is a lot of stuff to do with lighting. It's so important for lizards to, have UVB lighting, and there's so many different ways you can do that. So instead of just going into sort of what I do, I looked at every single option you've got for UV lighting or heating. There's so many different ways of heating stuff now. You got, radiant heat panels, those what they called?
Deep heat emitters,
deep heat emitters. Yeah, exactly that. And then you got tungsten bulbs, halogen bulbs, different ways of UV lighting. So I've laid out every single one I can think of, give its sort of pros and cons, and then I sort of wrap the chapter up as just what I do, but not saying that is the absolute way to do it. So I sort of wanted to educate people on different options. There's not one size fits all, but then also a lot of people just sort of want to know what I do. So it's like, well, at the end, this is what I've picked out of what I've just told you, and sort of wrap it up as a chapter. But that podcast you did with Thomas has been like so good for the lighting stuff. I mean, I learned so much from that podcast, and that's been put.
Oh, that's awesome, dude! I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, you actually cited in the book. So I cited the episode with Thomas.
No way.
Yeah. So I put the Expert and the Idiot podcast. Thomas's episode, which I don't know if a bit to what I was alluding to earlier, which I don't know if anyone's actually cited the podcast yet. I'm sure they might have. But
holy crap, dude! I want to faint right now.
It was just such an amazingly. I mean, you have some amazing questions. You're a way better interview than I am on my podcast. And then Thomas is just like a wealth of knowledge. I love that guy.
I've
been told about him a lot. by some of my friends. Like, you really need to look into his stuff. And I was like, yeah. A bit like I was saying, you get complacent. What I'm doing is working. So why would I bother going and looking at other avenues and other ways of doing stuff? But for a book, you can't do that, or else it would just be, my book. This is how it's done. And that's not really how I wanted the book to come off. So I listened to that 4-hour podcast probably 10 times. I was like, I got to, just that stuff that he was saying about the infrared. Yes, it gives out the infrared, but it's not actually a natural infrared, and it dehydrates the reptiles, which I've seen with tree monitors using those deep heat projectors. But they seem to dehydrate a lot more. So I literally put in that chapter about heat and lighting because I'm not the expert. I mean, you got Thomas, you got Francis Baines, Ferguson, all those guys are really, really into their lighting. That is their thing. And at the end of the chapter, I basically put, this is, the very basics. You could probably write a book just on heating and lighting, and then sort of give a load of references. If you want to look into it more, this book isn't the place for it. Go and look at top podcast expert and the Idiot podcast with Thomas, and then listed some papers off as well.
There's 2 of them. There's volume 1 and 2. Did you see the first one?
Maybe I missed that. No, I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh man, yeah, I think so. You got to check out. So the first one is it's a lot shorter. I think it's like only 2.5 hours. I say only.
That's still good. Yeah.
But that one was kind of me just dipping my toe into the world of lighting, and at the time I was using the deep heat projectors, and I can never remember if it's projectors or emitters. I know one is like trademarked, and the other one is it's like Kleenex and facial tissue. You know, but who says facial tissue? But yeah, so I think that the first one was like kind of the first way into that, and I've since then I've kind of switched over to the heat bulbs and the UVB, and it's a lot of fun. It's fun seeing the behavior change with the animals. That's a big thing. So I kind of want to, since we're talking about all this, and again, that's so cool, dude. That if the expert in the edit is mentioned in a book, I mean, that's.
It's got. I mean, that was a slog of a. I know how hard podcasting is, and to keep it going and keeping it engaging for 4 hours and whatever it was.
It was 4 hours and 50 minutes.
4 hours 50. Yeah, that's insane. To keep it so engaging and keep it, between the pair of you, then I don't think there's probably been a better podcast. Personally, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. As much as it wasn't really about the reptile stuff, but for anyone that keeps lizards, especially, lighting and heating, so, it made me think about it a lot more, and then just helped me massively with the book. So yeah,
wow. That's super. That's very, very flattering, and I really appreciate it. But I have to give 100% of the credit to Thomas, because you can say, I'm pretty sure I could have just shown up and said, this is Thomas Griffiths, and then just said like a keyword and he'd start going, you know, and
yeah. No, you have excellent questions. And like I said, he's a natural at, explaining stuff in really simple, good ways, where a lot of that lighting stuff I've been put off in the past, where it was very scientific and I couldn't really relate it so much to the husbandry side. He's got a very good way of, measuring the two up, so it's just not too much. There's wavelengths and spectrums and graphs, and actually applying that. So hats off to both of you.
Yeah, I will say that was I think the first episode I did with him, he said, like, do you want me to prepare slides and do this and do that? And I said, dude, I've already watched podcasts with you and you're so technical that it goes over my head, because I'm an idiot, right? So I need you to put this in regular blue collar, normal Joe terms for me, and just kind of lay it out as simplistically as possible. And that was like our first episode, where I'm like, just, use like regular words, and I'll ask you to clarify and things like that. And he really, really helped me a lot with that, for sure. Because like, once you start saying like, oh, this spectrum, that spectrum, this wavelength, all that, I'm like, do what? Yeah. Like how does this affect me?
Yeah.
But so let's say I was getting a tree monitor, and and I, like taking breeding out of the consideration, would you
Yeah.
keep a tree monitor sort of universally? Like, let's say I was getting a blue. Would it be universally kept whether it was breeding or not breeding? Like, do you think that there's health benefits to keeping it as if you were going to breed it, where they go through that lean time and then the time of plenty?
Yeah, you just probably don't need the plenty bit as much. I mean, a big struggle with monitor lizards is if you've got a female, it's very easy to get them to cycle and start laying infertile eggs. And if you don't have a nest box in there, you can actually cause detriment and get egg binding and problems like that, especially with
Mm.
females. Males, it's obviously not so much of a problem. But yeah, I spoke in the book of basically saying it's exactly the same, apart from adding a nest box. And if you've got a female, then I'd recommend you have that nest box in there anyway, even if you're not breeding them, because there's a very high likelihood that she will lay some infertile eggs, and it
Wow.
causes problems. But yeah, as far as keeping them, all the species can be kept exactly the same. So there's no real difference between a blue tree monitor. The blue tree monitor is the largest. I did some pretty good work. This is sort of an exclusive. I measured over 250 adult tree monitors. So now I can sort of conclusively say which one's the biggest, which one's the smallest, and where they all lie in that range. But I won't spoil it too much. But yeah, the blues are definitely the biggest, which we sort of knew, but it was guessing until you've measured 200 odd of them. So but it was nice, but there were some surprises in there. Like I said, I'll keep those for the book of what comes next.
Okay.
But yeah, the difference between the biggest blue tree monitor and then the other ones isn't a massive range. So as long as you're providing a big enough cage for that biggest size, I mean, tree monitors will use pretty much, you can't really go too big. The heating and lighting side of it becomes a bit more complicated when you do go, room size or very, very big, because you have to start adding multiple UV. As you know, you talk on Thomas, how much that UV gets spread becomes
Yeah.
harder when you've got a bigger enclosure and heating it. So it comes to a point where there's a bit of a detriment if unless you're wanting to run 3 or 4 LEDs, fair few heat lights and various UVs, that there's a sort of middle ground where it becomes a lot more simple. For example, like the breeding cages we use here are 4 foot wide, 4 foot high, and then 3 foot deep. That 3 foot
Okay.
deep is quite important, and that's not really that easy to do in a house. So what I've sort of recommended in the book is you go sort of 6 foot high, 2.5 deep, and 4 foot wide is sort of a minimum for say an adult tree monitor, and that can be used for all the species.
Okay, so if I were to get a tree monitor, so it's like I'm really tempted to say what's the minimum enclosure I can keep it in, but I don't want that to sound sort of callous and cruel.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the minimum ideal enclosure, for a tree monitor?
Yeah, see, this is when you write a book, you come into these things because that's what the question is, and the bigger the better, as we've just caveated there. But for me, and people might not agree with me, I personally think 4 foot wide by 2.5 deep by 6 foot high would be the absolute minimum for me. And I prefer depth over height. So all the breeding enclosures I use here and the enclosures I used at home were 4 foot wide, 4 foot high, and 3 foot deep. And that 3 foot deep changes the way that space gets used. You can fit a lot more angled branches in there. It's becomes a lot easier to sort of heat and offer different gradients of UV in when you've got that depth. 2 foot, which a lot of people do use, to me just seems too narrow to be able to get so many different gradients. And a lot of lizard keeping, to be fair, a lot of reptile keeping is not having set temperatures. It's offering a sort of a temperature that's outside of their range, a temperature below their range, and then sort of letting the animal decide between it. And then the UV is another one. You need a good UV at certain stages, but they need to be able to get away from that UV completely as well. So that 3
Mm.
foot deep is the way I do it. That's very hard to do in most people's houses. So I sort of had to think, okay, if you're not going to do the 3 foot deep, then 2.5 you can get through most doors as like a standard cage, and get that through a door, and then just make that extra foot up on the height. So yeah, I'd say 6 foot, 2.5 deep, and then 4 foot wide. But yeah, bigger the better, really. But that's the minimum I would use.
Okay, and then setting up your heating, I'm assuming that in order to create that gradient where they have a really hot basking spot with more UV, you're just going to have more branches available, right? And so you're going to have your halogen bulb set up with a UV lamp. And what how intense is the UV that you're giving them? Like, is it like a high percentage or a lower percentage one?
Yeah, I tend to use 14%, which is a high output tube, just because. But the caveat again for that is that I've got a solar meter, which I think anyone that's keeping lizards in this day and age, they really do need to do that, just for how much more those lights can give off, and how little, how less they can give off, and then the drop off in months. I've got UV tubes that are way over the manufacturer's and recommended replacement dates, but I'm able to test them to make sure they're actually giving out usable UV still. So I tend to use a higher percent UV because it drops off a lot slower. You go from a 14%, and then maybe after a year, it's down to like a 6%. Ideally, they probably want just a 6%, but then you're replacing the tubes, too much. There's ways you can sort of, mitigate for that. You can put in a lot more shaded areas. You can distance that UV a lot further from, your top branches. And just provide a gradient. If you got that meter, it's so easy to go, look, right at the UV at the basking site, that needs to be, the highest, and then move away from that. Right, I'm going to put a ledge in here, or I'm going to put a hide in here. So even though there's a lot of UV there, it can still get away from that and go into, drop down to nothing in the UV, but still get heat. Because that's another one that I've sort of don't agree with. A lot of people use combined UV heat and light, so they're forced to bask and forced to get the UV, which doesn't seem very natural to me, because it's not. They can be up to temperature but still require that amount, a similar amount of UV or less UV. So if you've got a basking area, and then you've got a gradient off where they're not getting heat but they're still getting UV, and then it sort of levels down into the cage. A 6 foot cage is a lot easier to do that with than say the 4 foots that I use, because you get a gradient. The UV, a T5 tube just won't throw that much UV down. But it's as important to have shaded areas as it is to have areas of high UV.
Okay, and so what wattage heat bulb are you going with, and what sort of a basking temperature target are you looking at? I'm assuming that if you're using a solar meter and you're measuring, kind of what your UV is and how intense it is, that you're probably also using a temp gun and getting an idea of what your temperatures are, right?
Yeah. So halogens vary. Like here, we can't get halogen bulbs. We actually use tungsten filament bulbs, which is like your pretty much old school bulb, and they can work just as well. In the UK, in those 4 foot cages, I think I managed to get them down to like a 50 watt halogen, but wow. It had quite a big spread. There was a company that was doing exchangeable cartridges that you could just put a different size or different wattage lamp in, but it still had a fairly big spread. It was amazing invention. Means you didn't have to you didn't have to swap the whole bulb out. You could just swap, your little halogen capsule. And I managed to get those down to about 50. But usually a 50 watt halogen is a very small bulb, so you tend to have to go up to like a 75. I think that's what I was using before. You put that to one side of the enclosure, obviously in your basking area, and then temp gun. You want to be around 40 Celsius. I don't know what that is in maybe 104 in Fahrenheit, I think it is.
Yeah, let me look that up real quick since we're here and we have the internet.
I'm pretty sure it's 104.
40, let's see. Yep, you nailed it. 104.
Other problem with this book, Adam, is obviously we're all in metric for most of the world, but hopefully a large percentage of Americans will want to read this book. So I've put both units in the book throughout. So I've had to put the
awesome.
The Imperial, which you guys are on first, and then I've been putting the metric after. Just so that's how I know that one off the top of my head. So yeah, 104 or 40 Celsius under the basking sort of zone, which is usually an angled perch. Then try and usually put like a hollow tube. Here we can't get cork bark, so here we use just a drainage pipe, and that sort of sits next to it, so they can then retreat into something, so they're not basking out in the open, but also get a good amount of heat. And they can obviously escape from the UV using it that way. And then an ambient temperature, which I don't know off the top of my head in Fahrenheit, would be 28 Celsius. So that's sort of your ambient temperature.
All right, so
82 maybe.
Let's see what 28 is. Yeah, 82. Boy, you're killing it, man.
So that's what for the rest of the cage, and then obviously it needs a cool area as well. And then that sort of drops down to 22 to 24, and then nighttime temperatures, similar sort of range. 22 to 24 at night, ambient.
Okay, and how are you approaching feeding? You said that are they mostly on an insect diet? So roaches, crickets, things like that.
Yeah, that should be the majority of their diet. In the wild, they feed primarily on katydids. I don't know if you definitely get them in the States. There's a few endemic species in the States, like a big grasshopper type thing. And that's pretty much those and different types of grasshopper are sort of 80% of their diet from gut contents that they've done in museum specimens. And then they're getting the occasional nestling bird, and then they'll eat lizards and small rodents for sure. In captivity, you can definitely give them rodents, but it can't be every meal. If you're trying to get a female up to breeding, then you can sort of include a few more rodents, or quail's a very good one. They're a bit leaner to get those in. But yeah, the majority, 80% of the diet really needs to be insects, whether it's crickets, locust, or cockroaches. Cockroaches can be a bit tricky as well. They can be sort of too high in certain things. So yeah, crickets and you guys struggle in the States to get locust because obviously a lot of them are invasive. So I think you guys use a lot more crickets than we do in Europe because the agricultural pest side of things.
What are some of the issues with the cockroaches?
They can cause gout in monitor lizards, especially dubia roaches. Just the way the calcium to phosphorus ratio is on them isn't so balanced. I can't remember what the chemical what they've got in them now. I should know. I've written it down. That basically causes gout. And then in the wild, they're not really getting that many cockroaches. It's definitely more katydids and then other locusts and stuff like that.
Okay, all right. How often, like if you had quail in the freezer, if you're feeding like 4 days a week, would you have like a quail day and then 3 insect days?
Yeah. Quail once a week, it can be fine. Just not too many of them, maybe 1 or 2 at most. It's good to chop and change it around. The tree monitors get very bored with prey items very quickly, which is annoying. They can go on be mad for cockroaches, which is annoying to try and wean them off the cockroaches, and then they can go for quail. They might stop eating quail and they'll go to small mice or fluff. So it's good to vary it around. And obviously, all these different prey items have got different nutritional values as well. But yeah, a basis really should be crickets or locust if you can get them. I mean, locust is sort of the golden food. But you guys really struggle in the States to get locust.
Wow, I honestly did not expect that. I didn't expect to hear like crickets for a tree monitor would be like the staple, and like I'm assuming that they would need to eat a fairly high quantity of those. So are you putting those in like a deli cup, and are you dusting those? Like how often are you doing a multivitamin?
Multivitamins usually once a week, and then calcium depends if it's a female or not. At least once a week, sometimes twice a week. All our breeding females get calcium twice a week here, and then vitamins once a week.
Okay. And then are you misting the enclosure, and like what does the water situation look like? Do they ever go in water, or is it just a bowl small enough to drink out of?
No, you can go in sort of the bowls we use here are sort of cat litter trays. They're maybe, a foot by half a foot by, I don't know what that is, 10
Yeah, like
centimeters,
4
whatever that
inches
is.
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4 inches. And they will go in it. Occasionally they'll soak. Usually if they're soaking for a long time, it means you've got mites, especially if you keep
Uh-oh.
snakes. They're not really known for prolonged soaking, but they will do it. And if your cage is getting too hot as well, they'll go in there and try and cool down. But they definitely drink out of, just still water. But yeah, an important part of their husbandry for sure is either hand spraying or using like a mist king, an automated misting system. For humidity as well, they will drink the droplets as well. And some seem to prefer drinking the droplets off themselves or off the furniture rather than using a bowl. Especially as babies, hatchlings are really bad for drinking out of water bowls during the first sort of couple of weeks, and they'll just drink by sort of hand misting.
Okay, so it's pretty imperative to give them a misting then.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't want to keep them without. It becomes, if you've got one cage with them, you can use the hand mister. But then once you start getting more than that, it becomes such a long job to actually mist them, because they'll lap, and you might be there for 10 minutes with them lapping up. It's just better to use a misting system at that point. And then also for
Okay.
humidity, they need to be sort of at least 70% humidity for most of the time. There's gradients
Oh, wow.
with that as well. You can let it, obviously, you don't want it stagnant. And then, as I said in my book, I've gone into a lot of detail, but moving air around using fans and stuff like that to move stagnant air around. It's quite hard to keep stuff indoors around 78 humidity without 70 or 80% humidity without getting stagnant air.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about handling and socialization? Is that easy to accomplish?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's not something I do with any of my monitors, really. I've never really been a hands-on sort of person, but a lot of the ones I've sold back in the UK have become super tame, and that's all done with tongue feeding. So if you're getting your cockroaches, which are a bit more of a treat, or maybe your quail day, you can sort of get your tongs out and bring them out, and then you just build trust by opening that enclosure, putting your hand out, and they will eventually just come onto your hand and round onto your shoulder and take the food. Which can get, I find it a little annoying when ones that are really food responsive, when you're just in there to do a water change and they're expecting food, and they'll start jumping out on you. But if that's what you're into, if you want a really social monitor, they become really, really socialized by just tongue feeding.
Okay. Awesome, man. Well, cool. Yeah, I appreciate you laying all that out. And yeah, I think we can probably wrap this up. What time is it over there and
Oh,
where
it's
you're
not
at?
too bad. It's 5 to 11, which is good. I do mine really, really late, and I'm usually up to 1 o'clock. So this has been really nice, actually.
Oh, okay, right on. I don't feel so bad now.
No, you're all good.
Is there something else you'd like to add, or do you think we kind of covered everything?
No, I think we covered everything, mate. Keep going on with your podcast. I'm very jealous of your questions and your flow. I wish I was a bit more like that, but yeah, no, I've been really enjoying yours. I'll go look back at your one with Thomas, because I think I've missed that one, which is excellent. I always like a podcast to listen to. But no, if anyone wants to see anything I'm doing, it's on the Instagram, really, Rare Reptiles and Pristaci on there. But yeah, thank you very much for having me on, mate.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the compliments. I think I'm just like, ADHD, and I'm all over the place. And, that's why I love recording early. I like recording early for me, because I'm like a pot of coffee and just ready to go. Like my nighttime stuff, I'm usually like ready to go to sleep.
Well, I do need to give a shout out of my podcast, obviously, Varanus Vault.
Yeah, hell yeah.
On the Trap Talk Reptile Network, MJ's done a really good job of having podcasts every day. I've been a bit slack lately because I've been doing a lot of traveling, but mine usually go out sort of every other Saturday. So that's just a shameless plug. But yeah, we're really lucky now with the amount of podcasts we've got. Yours is an excellent one. It's one of my favorites. And then, MJ, NPR, and all those guys. We're very lucky to have people like yourselves putting stuff out there.